let us stay just for tonight."
Standing at the front door was my 9-year-old grandchild, holding a baby, completely soaked from head to toe. My husband Roy and I exchanged glances, our eyes wide with shock. In the midst of this torrential downpour, Alexander had walked all the way here with a baby in his arms. Why on earth would an elementary school student do such a thing? My mind was swirling with questions, but I was so stunned by the surreal situation before me that I had no idea how to even begin asking Alexander what had happened. While I stood frozen, Roy, beside me,
"How can we take care of this brat?"
exploded with anger. Immediately, Roy grabbed his golf club, which he kept by the entrance as a hobby, his face contorted with rage. Alexander started trembling at the sight of Roy's furious demeanor. I, too, was taken aback by Roy's sudden outburst, and seeing Alexander in such a state only added to my panic. This was bad. I had to do something. Desperately, I tried to think of a way to defuse the situation. My name is Valeria. I'm 67 years old and a homemaker. I live with my husband Roy, who is 2 years older than me. Roy was a musician until about 5 years ago. He used to perform wearing sunglasses, his deep, resonant voice charming the younger crowd, and of course, I was his biggest fan. Even now, as we've grown older, Roy is still quite the dandy guy, and I'm proud to call him my husband. He's the kind of person who likes to see things in black and white. Once he trusts someone, he trusts them completely, but if he loses that trust, there's no going back. For better or worse, he's a straightforward man. We met through matchmaking services, but we've grown very close over the years, and I'm grateful that a popular guy like Roy fell for an ordinary woman like me. And up until 9 years ago, we used to live with our son. His name is Darius. He turned 30 this year, but it's been so long since we've seen him that I can't even remember the last time we celebrated his birthday. Darius was especially fond of his father, always seeking Roy's attention despite his busy schedule. Whenever Roy had a rare day off, they would always go out together. Roy loved his son back just as much, always finding time to play catch in the park or teach him how to play the guitar, no matter how tired he was. I would watch their interactions with a warm heart, enjoying the sight of their father-son bond. Our family was just like any other happy household, except for the fact that Roy was a celebrity. Darius was never the academic type. But since I was a homemaker and Roy an artist, we never pushed him too hard to study.
"As long as you have one thing you're good at, that's all you need. Just polish it a bit more than others, and it can become your job."
Got it, Dad. Following Roy's advice, Darius kept pursuing his passion for baseball. But that dream was shattered in his junior year of high school. He got hit by a pitch and injured his shoulder. The doctor said he would never be able to play baseball again. While it wouldn't affect his daily life much, he found it difficult to do things like hold onto the handrails on a train. Though I felt sorry for Darius, a part of me was relieved. Becoming a professional baseball player is incredibly rare. I thought it might be better for him to consider other paths while he still had time. It seemed like my secret wish was coming true. Roy, on the other hand, seemed at a loss for words. Darius had followed his father's advice and dedicated himself to baseball. Now that he couldn't pursue that path, Roy didn't know what new direction to guide him towards. Still, we supported Darius. It didn't matter if it wasn't baseball. As long as Darius was healthy, that was all that mattered to us. Darius was visibly upset when he could no longer play baseball. Even so, he managed to get into his college of choice and became a college student. Roy and I cried tears of joy, grateful that Darius had regained his spirit. Darius wasn't usually very talkative, but seeing us cry must have stirred something in him. He said nothing, just cried along with us. We ended up living apart from Darius when he was 21. He attended a college close to home and still lived with us. One day, he told us with a serious expression, "I'm getting married. I'm moving out tomorrow." We were completely taken aback by the word marriage coming out of Darius's mouth.
Marriage? What about college?
I asked, hesitantly. "I'm dropping out," Darius calmly replied.
Drop out? What about a job?
"I'm starting job hunting now. I'll find a company to join."
What about the girl? Have you met her parents?
Bethany grew up in a foster home. She doesn't have parents. She wants to get married soon. Seeing Darius's optimistic thinking, I felt worried. Next to me, Roy was folding his arms, deep in thought. I looked to Roy for help. Roy took a deep breath. "If you think you're ready, go ahead."
Roy!
I tried to get Roy to take back his words, but then I saw Darius's eyes light up, and I held back.
Thank you, Dad. Mom, thanks for everything.
Darius said this and left the next day with his belongings. I was at a loss for words, unable to accept reality. Roy said, "He'll be fine. He might not have been the best student, but he had the determination to keep playing baseball. He'll manage married life too."
Really? I hope so.
Roy seemed confident in how he had raised Darius. I didn't think we had failed as parents either. But as a mother, I was worried about whether young Darius could handle married life. I didn't realize at the time that this worry would only grow. Darius never brought his wife, Bethany, to our home. No matter how many times we asked him to, he wouldn't even respond. It might have been better if we could visit him directly, but we didn't even know the name of the apartment he was living in. When he said he was leaving, it was so sudden that we didn't have time to ask for details. We never imagined we wouldn't see him again, so we didn't worry too much. But now that we couldn't reach him, it was a different story.
Roy, have you heard back from Darius?
No. I thought maybe Roy, as his father, might have had an easier time getting in touch, but he hadn't heard back either.
Maybe they're just busy right now. Let's give it some more time.
Yeah. At that time, we still believed in Darius. But 3 months after he left, I heard something unbelievable. It happened when I was shopping at the local supermarket. One day, I happened to bump into Molly, my neighbor, at the grocery store. Molly said to me,
"Valeria, I heard you have a new grandchild. Congratulations." Valeria, I heard you have a new grandchild. Congratulations. What?
I was taken aback by the unfamiliar word grandchild and gave Molly a double take. "Oh? Is that not right?" The other day, I saw Darius with a woman who looked like his wife, and they were pushing a stroller. When I greeted them, they just nodded. They didn't seem very friendly. I haven't seen them in a while, so maybe they forgot about me.
I see.
I listened to Molly's story, feeling like I had wandered into some kind of soap opera. According to Molly, the person she saw was definitely Darius. Darius's appearance hasn't changed much over the years, so if you've met him once, it's hard to mistake him for someone else.
To be honest, I haven't been in contact with Darius since he left home. It's embarrassing, but I just found out about the grandchild now.
Really? How could they keep such an important thing from you? Molly was as shocked as I was by my confession. It's true. It's absurd not to know about the birth of a grandchild. That night, I told Roy what I had heard from Molly.
We have a grandchild? That means they must have already had a child when they got married. That's why he left so quickly.
Roy seemed more relieved to have an explanation for Darius's sudden departure than surprised by the grandchild.
This isn't the time to feel relieved. If we have a grandchild, we should celebrate and meet them.
You're right.
But where do they even live?
Exactly. That was the problem. Even when I try to contact Darius, he never responds. I wondered if he had found a job. If he had, maybe I could contact him through his workplace, but that would be difficult without knowing where he works.
If Molly saw them, they can't be living too far away.
Molly has trouble walking and doesn't usually go far from home. Since Molly had seen him, they must be living nearby.
We'll just have to keep trying to contact him. Eventually, he'll give in. Maybe he's not reaching out because he hasn't found a job yet and his pride is in the way. Do you really think so?
Roy seemed determined to believe in Darius. I wanted to believe in my child too, but it seemed unreasonable not to inform us about the birth of a child. Bethany, his wife, should have suggested visiting her parents-in-law. Either she didn't, or Darius wasn't listening to her. I couldn't believe time would resolve this. Incredibly, 9 years passed without seeing Darius or our grandchild. During that time, we did hear from Darius occasionally. Sporadically, he told us about the birth of our grandchild and that his name was Alexander. Whenever we tried to ask for their address or workplace, he would stop responding. What is he really up to? Even Roy, who had always trusted Darius, became frustrated with the lack of contact over the 9 years. He hadn't completely given up on him, but it was clear he was annoyed by the lack of response to our attempts to reach out. I felt the same way as Roy. We suspected there was a reason they weren't contacting us, but not hearing from them for so long made me feel like they no longer thought of us as parents. It made me feel so distant from them. What could have happened since they got married? There might have been something so serious that they couldn't talk to us about it. But without being able to reach them, we couldn't help. Thinking about Darius made me feel even more burdened. At that time, the world was in turmoil due to inflation and political issues, and the news was filled with stories of murders and vacant houses. Living as just the two of us, elderly couple, we had to be careful not to get caught up in any incidents. Then, everything changed on one stormy day. Neither Roy nor I could have predicted what would happen. It was a weekday evening. It had been raining heavily since the morning, and our area was prone to landslides. If the heavy rain continued, we might have to evacuate. The rain was so intense that it darkened the outside world. We were preparing to evacuate, packing our bags just in case. Just as we finished packing, the doorbell rang. Could it be a delivery?
No one would deliver on a day like this.
Roy gave a plausible response. Indeed. On such a stormy day, delivery workers would probably be off work. So who could be visiting? I looked at the monitor to see outside the door, but no one was there. There's no one out there.
What's going on? It's creepy.
Could it be a prank? But who would come to play a prank on a day like this? Curious, I cautiously went to the door and slowly opened it. Roy watched me with a sigh.
Are you grandmother?
Seeing the person standing outside, I was speechless. It was a child, about the age of an elementary school student. He was wearing a raincoat and holding a baby to his chest. The baby was also wrapped in a raincoat, but its face was wet from the rain. It was crying weakly. Despite my shock, the child's words, "Are you grandmother?" made me realize something. Could you be Alexander? I asked, and he nodded slightly. Is that baby your younger brother or younger sister? He nodded again in response to my question.
What's going on here?
Roy, peeking from behind, tried to understand the situation. Even I couldn't make sense of it. I wanted to ask Alexander many questions, but he looked too anxious to give many answers. Alexander looked back and forth between Roy and me and said in a weak voice,
"Please let us stay for just tonight."
The 9-year-old grandchild standing at the door, soaked and holding a baby, said this, and Roy and I exchanged astonished looks. In this storm, Alexander had walked with the baby. Why would an elementary school student do something like this? Questions swirled in my mind, but the surreal nature of the event left me unsure of how to start questioning Alexander. While I was frozen in shock, next to me,
"I can't take care of this brat,"
Roy yelled. Immediately, Roy grabbed his golf club from the entryway, his face contorted with rage. Seeing Roy like that, Alexander started to tremble. I was also taken aback by Roy's sudden outburst and worried about Alexander in front of me, causing me to panic. Roy had lost trust in his son Darius, who hadn't been in touch for a long time. He probably couldn't accept Alexander, Darius' child, right away either. This is bad. I have to do something. I desperately thought of a way to defuse the situation.
"Roy, just put down the golf club. Alexander is scared."
When I said that, Roy looked at Alexander's face and put down the golf club, saying, okay. I breathed a sigh of relief. Roy, too, seemed to have many thoughts about the sudden situation. He wasn't really trying to kick Alexander out. More than anything, seeing Alexander trembling while holding the baby might have softened Roy's heart.
"Alexander, come on in. Let's get you cleaned up and take a bath, okay?"
When I asked Alexander in the gentlest voice I could manage, he started to cry on the spot. I took the baby from Alexander and led him to the bathroom. Roy, unsure of what to do, watched us with a troubled expression. While Alexander was in the bath, I thought about how to buy the necessary items for taking care of the baby. Then Roy said, "I'm going out to get some supplies." I thanked him and told him to be careful. Roy, too, had been shaken up, but seeing Alexander trembling and the baby crying had changed his heart. Now, we just needed to create an environment where the two could feel safe and calm. When Roy came back from shopping, Alexander had just gotten out of the bath. I pulled out some of Darius' old clothes from the closet and handed them to Alexander. Alexander hesitantly took the clothes.
"Thank you,"
and said. I offered some juice Roy had bought and gave milk to the baby. As time passed, Alexander seemed to calm down enough to talk about what had happened. I exchanged glances with Roy and decided to ask Alexander what was going on.
"Dad and Mad went to work today too. I just wanted to leave that house so badly, so I ran away while they were gone."
Alexander, with a pained expression, told us bits and pieces of his experiences at home. Summarizing Alexander's story, it goes like this. Alexander had never been treated kindly by Darius or his mother, always being yelled at. He was given the bare minimum of food and never got the toys he wanted. Living in fear of his parents, Darius spent his school days in constant anxiety. Alexander had little memory of his birth mother Bethany, as Darius had divorced her at some point. His current mother is a woman named Rachel, whom Darius remarried 3 years ago. The baby girl born 2 months ago is named Kate, and she is Alexander's half-sister. Kate's mother, Rachel, had a troubled past and currently works at a club. With her flashy appearance and sharp personality, Rachel is harsh on Alexander, who isn't her biological child. Rachel neglects her own child, Kate, leaving all the diaper changes and feedings to Alexander. Darius, much like Rachel, does not take care of the child. Roy and I were at a loss for words as Alexander revealed shocking truths to us. We didn't even know Darius had divorced Bethany, nor that he remarried 3 years ago. From what Alexander says, this Rachel doesn't seem like a decent person. I don't know what happened to Darius after he left home and got married, but he seems to have changed significantly. Marrying a woman like Rachel shows that change. The fact that Darius isn't taking care of his child and is being harsh on Alexander was shocking for Roy and I.
Is that true?
Roy's eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't accept the fact that the son he raised was treating his grandchild this way. I understood his feelings completely.
Yes. Dad is always angry, saying his ex-wife stole all his money and ran away. He says he regrets ever marrying her, with a scary look on his face. But Dad scares me more. My current mom doesn't think of me as her son either.
Anne. Alexander paused. He seemed unsure if he should continue. We braced ourselves for his next words.
Dad and Mom, because they don't have any money, they break into other people's houses to steal. They told me to stay quiet at home today while they go out to steal. They threatened me, saying you know what would happen if you told anyone. I got tired of all the threats and decided to run to your house, something I heard Dad talk about before. I figured they wouldn't expect me to run away on a rainy day like this. It took 2 hours to walk here, but I didn't mind. I just wanted to get away from Dad and Mom.
Alexander's story was hard to believe. But considering everything, it was more dangerous to assume Darius was still thinking straight. I was filled with a desire to believe Alexander, who had run away carrying Kate, completely drenched.
That must have been so hard for you. Don't worry, your grandmother and grandfather will help you.
Yes.
Stealing is out of the question. What on earth is Darius thinking?
Calming down the furious Roy, I pondered ways to deal with Darius and Rachel.
I know the house Dad and Mom are breaking into today. They were careless enough to talk about it at night, thinking I'm just an elementary school student.
We held our breath at Alexander's words.
Is that true? Yes. I even took a note. Look.
Alexander pulled out a note with an address written on it from his pants pocket and showed it to us. Seeing the note, Roy and I exchanged glances and nodded.
All right, we're going there. Alexander, don't worry, we'll be with you.
Okay, Grandpa. Roy blushed and smiled, clearly flustered to be called Grandpa by Alexander. And this time, clutching the golf club firmly, we got into the car, ready to head towards the house where Darius and his gang were. The house Alexander told us about was an hour's drive away. It was in a quiet, upscale neighborhood, where all the houses looked like they belonged to wealthy people. The rain had stopped during our drive, and the evacuation order for our area was lifted. Is this the place? We parked the car in a lot a bit away from our destination and walked towards the house where Darius was allegedly breaking in. Roy, holding the golf club, took the lead and stood in front of the gate. I was carrying Kate. Kate was sleeping soundly in my arms. Entering the house would make us trespassers too, so we peeked into the house from the garden and saw 2 figures moving inside. We hesitated, unsure if they were the homeowners, but then Alexander exclaimed, "It's Dad and Mom." That confirmed it for us. Roy took a deep breath and shouted,
Darius!
Meanwhile, I called the police. The silhouettes of Darius and Rachel froze. They would either have to leave through the front door or come out through the garden window, but either way, they would have to face us. Darius and Rachel must have been wondering what to do. But when Roy shouted again,
Hey, come out now, or I'll call the police,
they gave up and came out through the front door. In reality, I had already called the police, so they were fooled.
What's going on?
Why is Alexander? Seeing us, Darius turned pale. Next to him was Rachel, who, as I had heard, had a flashy appearance and a severe look, making me instinctively want to avoid her. I felt that being around her would have a bad influence on me.
Darius, what are you doing? This evening, Alexander walked to our house with Kate. He said he didn't want to stay at home anymore. After talking to Alexander, I found out that you were breaking into houses. So we decided to catch you red-handed. What? Alexander! What are you doing?
Furious, Darius took large strides towards Alexander. He raised his fist, and Alexander closed his eyes tightly.
Hey, that's enough. If you touch Alexander, I won't forgive you.
Roy grabbed Darius's arm, and Darius clicked his tongue and lowered his arm.
You all don't get it. You're messing with our work. Alexander, we provide for you with this work. Why are you messing it up?
Darius spat his words at Alexander with hatred. This wasn't the Darius I knew. I wondered when he had become such a terrible person. Alexander was trembling at first. But perhaps because he had us by his side, he glared back at Darius. I've been doing everything you and Mom said. I had to take care of Kate because neither of you would. I hated your work but couldn't say anything. This isn't a real job. It's a crime. I don't want to live with criminals anymore. Crying, Alexander, pouring out his true feelings, insisted that he could only see Darius and Rachel as criminals, not as parents.
Hey, what are you talking about? Have you forgotten all the gratitude you owe us for raising you? Such a disobedient brat. We can't even think of him as our child.
They spat out those words harshly. Both Roy and I had enough.
Gratitude for raising him, you say? When did you ever actually raise Alexander?
Roy's voice, filled with intensity, startled both Darius and Rachel.
That's right. You barely ever contacted us, and when we find out what you've been up to, it's unforgivable to treat our grandchild this way. Apologize to Alexander right now. Otherwise, we'll turn you over to the police immediately.
Even though we had already called the police, I shouted to scare them. But
you're joking. Why should we bow our heads for this kid? I never even wanted a child like this. Try being forced to take in a kid you never wanted.
They continued to resist. I began to lose hope, thinking there was nothing more we could say to change Darius and Rachel's minds. Just then, we heard the sirens of a police car.
This is the police. What's going on here?
I explained the situation to the officers who stepped out of the patrol car. Seeing the sudden appearance of the police, Darius and Rachel were at a loss for words. The police, after hearing my explanation, arrested Darius and Rachel and tried to put them in the patrol car.
Hey, what's going on? When did you call the police? That's right. Using dirty tricks, how cowardly!
Darius and Rachel shouted in protest. Roy and I exchanged glances and sighed in exasperation. Even when caught red-handed by the police, they still resisted, unable to see that what they had done was wrong. I quietly watched the situation unfold. Looking at Alexander, I felt a strong sense of duty to protect this child and shouted,
"Cowardly? That's our line. You've been abusing the child, not working, and doing such things. Isn't that way more cowardly? Do you know how many people you've made sad with your actions? Reflect on this in prison."
When I shouted this, Darius and Rachel, unable to say anything in return, were dragged into the patrol car by the police. We decided to go along with them for questioning. I held Alexander's hand the entire time, trying not to wake Kate, praying that our family's future would be bright. After the questioning, we were released and returned home together. It turned out that Darius and Rachel had committed a total of 30 burglaries. Darius, having no steady job, continued to break into homes and couldn't contact us. The recent news about the increase in burglaries was also their doing. I almost fainted when I heard about it. But seeing Darius's drastically changed appearance after a long time, it made sense. Darius had struggled with job hunting since his first marriage, which led to his downfall, and he started associating with bad company. Around that time, his ex-wife Bethany, fed up, left him, and he started taking out his frustration on Alexander. Alexander always lived in fear of Darius's attacks. Rachel, whom he finally remarried, turned out to be just as terrible. She was the same kind of person as Darius, which only added to Alexander's stress. That stress exploded, leading to him escaping to our house as he did this time. Darius and Rachel are now awaiting sentencing. They have committed burglary 30 times, so the punishment will be quite severe. Naturally, we have severed all ties with Darius. We have decided that even if he gets out and seeks help from us, we will not assist him at all. Neither of them has ever worked a proper job, so just surviving will be very challenging for them. They might as well get a part-time job and learn the hard way how tough it is to earn money. I've sworn that they will never see their kids again. We've decided to take in Darius and Kate. Rachel's parents aren't exactly decent people either. When Rachel was first arrested, we discussed what to do with Kate, Rachel's child, but it seemed they didn't care about Kate at all. So, Roy and I decided to raise both Alexander and Kate together. Alexander likes Kate, and I'm glad they won't be separated. Roy is now very fond of Alexander and absolutely adores Kate, calling her cute all the time. He's going to be one doting grandfather. Our new life as a family of 4 is about to begin. Given all the sadness Alexander has endured, we want to make Alexander and Kate as happy as we can.
Shut up, you useless. Hurry up and make me some food.
My son, Mark, spat those words at me, hurling insults. Oh no, here we go again. Another day in this hellish situation. Thinking that, I tried to make myself small, attempting to escape from his look of disgust. He just turned 24 this year. I struggled to put him through college. And he finally got a job 2 years ago, supposedly becoming a full-fledged adult. He used to be such an adorable and precious son. That is, until this abnormal rebellious phase began. I'm pretty sure it started back when he was in high school. I don't know what he's so irritated about, but the slightest thing that displeases him causes him to shout, yell, and throw things. I kept telling myself it was just puberty and tried not to get too angry, but maybe that was a mistake. Even after the usual period of teenage rebellion had passed, there were no signs of his defiant attitude coming to an end. Well, that's not quite right. It seems his irritation is mainly directed at me. Ever since he started working, he respects my husband Daniel, who became a company executive. He even looks at him with admiration. But the moment he lays eyes on me, he gives me this look mixed with contempt and scorn, full of hatred. I don't know what he hates so much about me, but whenever Daniel is away on business trips, Mark hurls terrible insults at me. How did it end up like this? Where did I go wrong in raising him? As I kept dwelling on those thoughts, I ended up falling ill. I was diagnosed with influenza and went home with a high fever, my mind in a haze. Then I collapsed onto the bed, practically losing consciousness.
Hey, wake up!
A grating shout and violent shaking caused me to groggily open my eyes. His face was twisted in an ugly scowl as he noisily demanded that I make him food. I have the flu. I'm running a fever, so could you please bring me an ice pack? I made that request, but Mark just shouted,
"Don't mess with me!"
and stormed out of the room. I can't believe he won't even grant me this small favor. The moment I had that thought, something poured down on my head from above.
What the?
Looking up in surprise, I saw Mark with an empty bucket in his arms, a malicious grin on his face. Looks like he dumped a bucket of ice water on me.
That cool you down?
He mocked me with those words. Then from behind him, I heard a low, hellish voice.
Hey, Mark. Is that all you have to say?
My name is Nicole. A 50-year-old working woman. I met my husband, Daniel, who is the same age as me, after we started working. We've had our share of arguments, but I think we get along quite well without any major fights. He now serves as an executive at a large corporation and is often away from home due to business trips and meetings. However, I believe he cares about me in his own way. When he is at home, he proactively helps with household chores like a good husband should. From the outside, our home may seem happy, but we had a particular concern weighing on us. It's about our son, Mark, who is now 24 years old this year. His rebellious phase got worse after he entered high school. I've always been a bit introverted, so I guess he doesn't like that about me either. He stopped throwing things or breaking walls, but the moment he sees me, he glares at me as if he's met a hated enemy and hurls harsh words at me. Daniel would get furious when he saw this, so Mark behaves in front of him. But as soon as it's just the two of us, he becomes aggressive, which troubles me. Mark, who has a large build like Daniel, scares me. Cowering in fear of not knowing when he might do something also seems to displease him. In contrast to me, Mark apparently respects Daniel, who deals with things resolutely. Daniel serves as an executive at his company, so he seems to be Mark's role model. Because of this situation, when Daniel notices Mark being hostile towards me, he scolds him, and he apologizes obediently. But it's only superficial. Deep in his eyes, there was always disdain for me. Mark's rebellious phase didn't end even after he became an adult and got a job. With Daniel being away from home more often, I feel like Mark's defiance towards me is growing year by year.
Welcome back. You're late today.
I accidentally let those words slip out, and Mark glares at me.
Shut up, you useless woman.
I'm working here.
It's not an easy job that anyone can do like yours.
Don't complain about every little thing. That's the kind of retort I get whenever I say anything. I'm sorry. You're right. I timidly gauge his mood. He probably doesn't like seeing me like this either, clicking his tongue and quickly going to his room. I let out a sigh. Where did I go wrong in raising him? What is it about me that he dislikes so much? For the past few years, I've been agonizing over it whenever I see Mark.
I'm home, Nicole. Wow, another extravagant meal today.
Returning to the living room while taking Daniel's bag as he came back from a business trip. He smiled happily upon seeing the lavish dinner. It's no exaggeration to say that I prepare these meals to see this smile. To reward Daniel, who is always working hard while enduring the pressure of being a corporate executive, I cook a luxurious meal on days when he comes home. I hand him a cold beer and serve the freshly made soup to soothe his tired body. Just seeing his delighted face makes me feel like all my worries have been blown away. However, my moment of happiness quickly comes to an end.
You only buy convenient meals on regular days though.
Mark mutters. Indeed, my work ran late yesterday, so I bought some deli food from the supermarket for dinner. But it's not like I settle for deli food every day as he implies. But Mark dislikes the fact that I always make these lavish meals whenever Daniel comes home. He thinks of me as a detestable mom who hardly does any housework. Due to work on regular days, but puts on a good face only when he is back. He thoroughly despises me, his mom, who appears depraved to him.
Hey, Mark. What's with that tone?
I didn't say anything. Daniel scolds Mark, who was glaring at the extravagant meal with a look of hatred, but he turns his face away. Daniel sighs and starts eating. This has been going on for years, and he seems to be giving up too. After the meal, Mark quickly moves to the sofa to watch TV. Daniel casually helps with clearing the dishes, but when was the last time Mark helped out? Even when I once asked him to help take out the trash or put away the dishes, I was met with a terrible response. Huh? Why do I have to do that? Housework is a woman's job, isn't it? Even my boss's wife does everything at home. Don't try to take it easy by yourself. Saying that, he threw the garbage bag at me, and I never asked him for help again. No matter what I say, it's futile. Even when Daniel scolded him before, he obediently listened in the moment. But as soon as he knew Daniel was away on a business trip, he went right back to his old ways. He leaves his clothes lying around after taking them off, demands a meal as soon as he gets home, and doesn't even get up from the table. Because he talks back to me no matter what I say, I've stopped saying anything at all. I know this is making Mark even more defiant, but I no longer have the courage to scold him after receiving too many horrible words. Even Daniel consoles me.
You don't have to push yourself.
Saying, we had completely given up on Mark. Then one day, I felt a chill. I woke up feeling terrible, nauseous and all. I talked to my boss, left work early, and rushed to the hospital near the office. It turned out to be the flu. I reported it to my boss right away and got a week off. Gradually, my joints started aching. I guess the fever was setting in. As soon as I got home, I collapsed into bed and fell asleep.
Hey, wake up! Why are you sleeping without making dinner?
I was jolted awake by shouting and my body being shaken. Wait a second, Mark. I have a fever. I said that while holding back the urge to vomit, but Mark just yelled louder.
Huh? A fever? I don't care. Go make dinner.
As Mark tried to snatch away my blanket, tears welled up in my eyes.
Stop it! I have the flu. Let me sleep.
I managed to say in a feeble, cough-ridden voice, but Mark showed no sign of believing me.
The flu? You bullshit. You're just faking it, aren't you? Hurry up and make dinner. I'm starving here.
Shivering with fever, I desperately clutched the blanket. Call it a lie, call it malingering, I was in no condition to get up. Through my shaky vision, I realized the fever was rising, just as I expected.
Please! Stop it, Mark. I'm not feeling well. Bring me an ice pack.
This is how much my own mother is pleading. Even for Mark, I thought he'd at least do that much. But Mark only got angrier at my request.
An ice pack? Why the hell should I have to do that?
Kicking the side table, he stomped out of the room noisily. God, what a son. His mother is suffering this much, and he can't even bring an ice pack? The tears spilling out felt hot. The moment I wrapped myself in the blanket, ice water was suddenly dumped on me from above. I leapt up. Before I could process what happened, the cold water seeped through my body.
What are you doing?
Mark grinned at me, shivering satisfyingly.
Did that cool you down? Now hurry up and make dinner.
As he grabbed my soaked pajamas, a voice that sounded like it crawled out from the depths of the earth rang out from behind Mark.
Hey, Mark. Is that all you have to say?
Mark jumped as if struck by the voice and spun around.
Anthony? Why are you here?
The man shoved aside the startled him and wrapped me in a towel he found nearby. It was Anthony Smith, a friend of Daniel's and also Mark's boss. He used to come over to our house a lot, and I doted on him quite a bit since he looked up to Daniel so much. But ever since Mark was born and Daniel's business trips increased, we'd only kept in touch by text. Mr. Smith, He cut me off as I tried to ask why he was here, and laid out a fresh blanket for me. He may not have changed, but I'm surprised he still remembered where we kept the bedding. Laying me down as I grew hazy with fever, he glared at Mark, who stood there ashen-faced.
Does he always treat you like this? Huh?
No, well... Mark seemed unable to comprehend what was happening. His boss showing up out of the blue, and on top of that, his boss tending to me with practiced ease, it looked like it thoroughly baffled him. As Mark stood there stunned by the sudden turn of events, Anthony began to explain.
You see, I owe Nicole and Daniel a great deal.
That he was Daniel's friend, that he'd been in their care for a long time. That they continued to dote on him even after they got married. Anthony's admiration for Daniel was so effusive it was almost embarrassing to hear. It made me proud to know Daniel was looked up to this much.
I knew you were Nicole and Daniel's son the moment you joined the company as a new hire.
Then why didn't you say anything? As like his calculating character, he's probably thinking he could have gotten closer to the capable Anthony. It makes me despair for my own son.
I had no intention of mixing personal matters with work.
Seeing through Mark's ulterior motives, Anthony stated bluntly.
First of all, you'd find it hard to work too if your dad's friend was your boss, wouldn't you?
Unable to argue with that, Mark made an awkward face.
Mom, did you know Mr. Smith was coming today?
Mark accused, biting his lip in frustration. Seeing him like that, Anthony heaved a big sigh.
She didn't know.
In the first place, I just found out now that Anthony is Mark's boss. The company name I heard from Anthony long ago is different from where Mark works. Maybe they changed the company name at some point. I wasn't sure about Daniel. But I certainly didn't know, and I didn't even think he would come to visit at this timing. I desperately denied it to Mark, who was glaring at me. I shrugged my shoulders, wondering what he thought of Mark's ugly behavior.
The other day, Daniel invited me to hang out with him after a long time. He said he wanted to surprise you too.
He had just gone on a trip, so he seemed to have brought a souvenir on purpose. Mark awkwardly averted his gaze from Anthony, who was holding up the souvenir in his hand.
Just a little while ago, I got a call from Daniel saying he was running a bit late and to go ahead and enter the house. When I was about to ring the doorbell, I heard a scream.
Anthony said that when he put his hand on the door, thinking something had happened. The door was unlocked, and he hurriedly entered the house, fearing it might be a burglar or something.
I'm sorry for worrying you. It's embarrassing to be seen like this.
Breathing heavily, I finally managed to squeeze out my voice, and Anthony hurriedly knelt down beside me.
Nicole, please stay in bed. I'm the one who should apologize. So sudden, oh. You really have a high fever.
When he readjusted the blanket, his hand must have touched my face. He hurriedly wiped my wet hair again with a towel.
Thank you. Actually, it seems I've caught the flu.
Anthony's expression turned to one of anger. He turned to Mark and shouted in an angry voice.
You threw ice water on her when she had such a high fever. How dare you?
Mark was so overwhelmed that he sat down and put his arms in front of his face to protect himself. Oh, what a pathetic son he is. I watched the scene unfold in the corner of my hazy vision, breathing out hot breaths.
What? What's going on?
In the midst of this, it seemed that Daniel had come home. He peeked into the bedroom after hearing the noisy voices.
What are you guys doing? Nicole! What the hell happened?
He was surprised by the unbelievable sight of me lying in bed with labored breathing. Anthony shouting with an angry expression, and Mark cowering in fear. To the astounded Daniel, Anthony briefly explained the situation.
"This idiot, what has he done?"
An angry shout even louder than Anthony's resounded, and Mark began to apologize while trembling. "I'm sorry. She said she wanted to cool down, and I was just hungry, so."
"It's not just. This isn't something you can apologize for. Do you understand?"
He probably didn't really understand why he was being yelled at. Mark started making irrelevant excuses, and Daniel and Anthony's anger exploded. I'm sorry. Anthony grabbed Mark by the neck as he apologized with tears in his eyes and left the bedroom.
"I'll beat some sense into him. I'll join you right away." "I'm sorry, but please scold him,"
Daniel replied, and he replaced the wet towel and pajamas for me. He threw the fallen ice into the trash can and tossed the wet bed sheets into the laundry basket.
"I'm sorry. If I had been more careful."
Mark was relatively well behaved in front of Daniel, so he probably never thought he would go this far. I had also been considerate and given up on consulting with him or scolding Mark. It's not just your fault. Sadly, it's our failure as parents. I'm sorry. As I said that while coughing, Daniel bit his lip and apologized again. The way he bit his lip was so similar to his son, despite being so different in character. I wondered how he had grown up to be such a person. Tormented by deep regret, I had fallen asleep before I knew it. Even after I fell asleep, it seemed that Mark was lectured by Daniel and Anthony until late at night. A few days later, Anthony came to visit again and told me about Mark's behavior at work. It turned out that there were rumors that Mark was also harsh on other female employees within the company. His performance was decent, and he pretended to be a nice guy in front of Anthony and other superiors, just like his attitude towards Daniel. Therefore, perhaps because he was the son of the adored Daniel, they thought the rumors were spread by employees who were jealous of Mark's performance and didn't pay much attention to them. However, after this incident, they changed their minds and immediately conducted a fact-finding investigation, which revealed that Mark had been far more misogynistic than they had thought. Some female employees even cried during the interviews, and his past problematic behaviors finally came to light. I apologize for the trouble he has caused.
"No, I'm his boss and I didn't notice either."
Anthony said that to me when I apologized, but it was clear that our parenting had failed. I was so ashamed and miserable that I couldn't possibly lift my head. Mark was to receive a pay cut, and it seems he went crying to Anthony. But he was flatly rejected as he brought it upon himself. Rather, he was told to fix that twisted mentality of his and was sent to an external training program on morals that was rumored to be quite strict. We ended up having the company follow up on our parenting.
"I'm sorry to Daniel and Nicole, but I couldn't protect him either."
The problematic behavior Mark had been causing due to his misogyny quickly spread throughout the company. And it seems he is being viewed with a very cold eye. It seems that even the other superiors he had been sucking up to have given up on him. And Anthony told me that he is feeling quite miserable.
"No, I just hope this will make Mark a better person. I know it's impossible to tell you not to worry, but absolutely do not help Mark even if he comes to you for help." As if seeing through my heart as I sighed with worry, Daniel said that no matter how terribly he treated me, Mark is still my son. I also felt guilty for raising him like that. Seeing me so dejected, Daniel kicked Mark out of the house. He declared that he was disowning him and would never let him enter the house again. If I thought about what was best for him, I realized that sometimes tough love was necessary. And I was scolded a little for that, but I finally started to see that it might be true. On the day Mark was kicked out of the house,
I'll never forget the tired look on his face and the resentment-filled eyes he gave me. Noticing this, Daniel's anger became even more apparent. And he demanded that Mark return the money he had lent him to buy a new car right away.
I don't have that kind of money.
To Mark's response, Daniel coldly said,
If you can't come up with it, then sell that car and pay me back immediately.
With no other choice, it seems Mark had to give up the car. I was later told that the money had been properly transferred. Maybe Mark and I will never truly understand each other. Those were the kind of eyes he had. Until the very last moment he left this house, he looked at me with such bitterness and resentment. After that, it turns out Mark ended up quitting his job. He couldn't handle the rumors spreading throughout the company. Daniel went to check on him and said it seemed Mark was living in an old apartment and working part-time jobs. Mark, who had always lived in his parents' home, was probably paying for utilities for the first time. At first, he apparently tried to keep up appearances as usual, but his savings quickly ran out. One day, perhaps unable to stand that kind of life anymore, he called me when he knew I would be alone.
This is all your fault. What mom you are, a woman you are, putting me through like this.
He went on and on with his resentful words. Mark is probably a lost cause now. There's no sign of remorse whatsoever. If he had apologized even once, if he had pleaded for help just once, I probably would have lent him a hand without telling Daniel. But now, I just don't care anymore. No matter how much it pained me to give birth to my own child, how can he think I'd be okay with being hated this much? Does he think that just because I'm his mother, just because I'm a woman, he can say whatever he wants?
You're pathetic. Get over yourself already.
I said that and hung up the phone. The annoying ringtone started ringing again right away, but I unplugged the cord. I've already blocked his number on my cell phone. This home phone was the last connection I had with Mark. And Mark severed that connection himself. After discussing it with Daniel, we decided to move to a new house. Luckily, in this day and age, a couple in their 50s in their prime working years can rent a house of this size anywhere. Even if Mark came to that house starving, it's probably an empty lot by now. Unless Daniel or I contact him, I may never see him again. But that's okay. After a long time, it'll be just Daniel and me, and I look forward to enjoying our retirement in a small room. Too bad.
I'll give you as much money for compensation as you want, you poor thing. You know that Mary is the one who's the CEO, right?
I'm Mary. I've been married to my husband David for 2 years. We both work and are so busy that we hardly have time to talk except on weekends, but our relationship is strong, and we go on an overseas trip together once a year. When we got married, we decided to build a new house and splurged on a mansion. I'm satisfied with our current life. I have a good friend from high school named Emma, and we occasionally go out for lunch together. Emma has high standards for men and isn't married yet, but she has a strong desire to marry. Especially, she won't compromise on finding someone with a high income.
Hey, can I come over to your house sometime?
And right now, I'm having lunch with my friend Emma for the first time in a while. We've both been busy and haven't been able to meet often, but we've kept in touch through calls and messages. Today, our schedules aligned. Emma and I have been close friends since high school, sharing everything about each other. Both the good times and the hard times, they all have become fond memories. Since marrying my husband 2 years ago and becoming busier at work, I've had less time to see Emma. My husband usually has weekends off, but due to the nature of his sales job, working on holidays isn't unusual. He was busy with work, and I was figuring out how to spend my free time alone when Emma contacted me, leading to this moment.
Sure, my place is close by. How about we have tea at my house after this? Really? I'd love to.
After getting married, my husband and I built a house, but since I usually met Emma outside, this was the first time I invited her over. After finishing lunch, we headed to my house. Upon arrival, Emma was amazed.
Wow, this place is a mansion. Amazing!
When we built our house, we didn't hold back because it was a once-in-a-lifetime purchase, resulting in a house larger than the average family home. Being new, the interior was still pristine, and Emma seemed to love it.
We splurged a bit. It's our dream house, after all. It's so spacious and beautiful. Must have cost a fortune? It was a big purchase, but it's our home. Cost us about $1 million.
Emma was shocked at that.
$1 million? Is David's salary that high?
Emma has always had high standards for men, particularly regarding income. Her question seemed to stem from those values.
David's salary? Well, it's pretty good for his age, I guess.
I tried to answer without giving specifics, to avoid any offense. I see. I didn't realize at the time, but this vague response was a sign of things to come. Unaware of Emma sneering behind my back, I went on to prepare the tea in the living room.
Hey, since I'm here, can I stay until David comes home so I can say hi?
Emma asked with a smile, teacup in hand. Seeing no reason to refuse, I happily agreed.
Great. Where's the bathroom?
This way. I showed Emma to the bathroom and waited for her in the living room. In the meantime, I messaged my husband that Emma was visiting and suggested we have dinner together.
Wait, that's my bag. I got lost coming out of the bathroom. Ended up touring the house and found this. This brand's really expensive, right? Mind if I borrow it for a while?
It wasn't that far from the bathroom to the living room. She probably wanted to see the house, but the bag Emma had was supposed to be in my bedroom. Realizing she had entered my bedroom without permission was unsettling. But I didn't make a fuss and reluctantly agreed to lend her the bag.
Okay, but you must return it. It's a gift from my husband. Of course, don't worry, I will.
Later, feeling a bit uneasy, I checked the bedroom while I was supposed to go to the bathroom. Nothing seemed ransacked, but it looked like the closet had been rummaged through, with bags and shoes slightly scattered. I decided to mention it to Emma when I returned to the living room. Emma, you went into the bedroom, right? Seems like you went through the closet too. I'd rather you didn't do that. When I looked Emma in the eye and spoke, her eyebrows twitched momentarily. You're right. Sorry. Won't do it again.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
While we were talking, my husband came home. I had told him in advance that Emma was visiting, so perhaps out of consideration, he brought home a cake. I'm home.
Welcome back. Thanks for the cake. This is my friend Emma. I mentioned her in a message. How about the three of us have dinner together?
Nice to meet you, Emma. Mary always speaks highly of you. Of course, I'd love to. Nice to meet you too. I'm sorry I couldn't attend your wedding, but I'm happy to meet you like this. Emma had been ill and couldn't attend our wedding, so this was her first meeting with my husband. After dinner, we enjoyed the cake my husband had bought with some tea. Emma's friendly nature meant she quickly got along with my husband, and the evening ended on a high note. About a month later, I started noticing changes in my husband. He would quickly look away during conversations and spent more time on his phone. He even started taking it to the bathroom and shower. It was an obvious change. I considered checking his phone at one point, but decided against it, feeling there wouldn't be anything pleasing to find. However, his behavior was typical of someone hiding something, and I couldn't help but suspect him. Our conversations at home became increasingly rare. Furthermore, his weekend work increased, and we began living like ships passing in the night. One day, I came home to find divorce papers on the table. Though I had anticipated it, seeing the filled-out papers still shook me. I immediately called my husband.
I just got home and saw the table. What's this about?
It means what it says.
I want a divorce. I knew something was off, but tell me why. I've fallen in love with someone else. Are you saying you've been cheating? It's not cheating. I've seriously fallen for her. Though it might seem like cheating to you. How is it not cheating? Does she know you're married? She knows, but...
My husband hesitated, making it clear we needed a face-to-face conversation. As I was about to speak, "Hello, Mary? It's me." A familiar voice replaced my husband's.
Emma? Yes. I'm dating David. And we want to get married.
Hearing this, I felt despair. My heart raced, and I felt incredibly upset.
What do you mean, get married? David is my husband. I fell for him the moment I met him at your house. We exchanged contacts and started talking, and things escalated. What do you mean escalated? What are you thinking?
Anger, emptiness, and sadness overwhelmed me, leaving me speechless. I know it's bad. But what can we do? We were meant to be.
I'm grateful to you for bringing us together,
Emma said without a hint of remorse, even though she claimed to feel bad. Her voice, instead, sounded defiant. I could never forgive the betrayal of my husband and a friend I had been close with since our student days.
You don't really feel bad, do you? Let me speak to my husband instead. David said there's nothing left to talk about. Can you just sign the divorce papers and submit them as soon as possible? How can I agree to anything without a proper conversation? Tell him to come home at once.
What? That's impossible. He's living with me now.
There's nothing to talk about, right? You just need to sign the divorce papers.
I felt nothing but suspicion and irritation towards Emma, who answered nonchalantly as if she either wanted to provoke me or bore some grudge against me.
Just put my husband on the phone.
My loud demand didn't faze Emma, who just scoffed and replied mockingly.
Whatever you say, it's not going to happen. Bye.
Holding the phone after she unilaterally ended the call, I stood there dumbfounded for a while. The sleepless nights continued, and my husband didn't come back during that time. The divorce papers left on the living room table seemed to be waiting for my signature. Emma kept sending me multiple photos of her and my husband together, as if to flaunt their close relationship. My mental health deteriorated to the point where it began to affect my job. So I decided it was time to seriously consider divorce and consulted a lawyer. I had a lawyer acquaintance whom I decided to consult. After setting up an appointment, I met with the lawyer and explained my situation.
It must have been tough.
My lawyer listened attentively to my story.
What would you like to do?
My lawyer asked, and to my surprise, my answer came more easily than I thought.
I want a divorce. But I want them to be properly punished. That's understandable. Let's make sure to claim compensation. We can't let the evidence they've been so kind to send us go to waste. Right. I'll claim compensation from my husband and Emma and make a clean break. Thank you for your help.
Leave it to me. And, although it might be unnecessary to say, try to eat well and get enough sleep to take care of your health.
Thank you.
After talking with the lawyer, I decided to take the necessary steps to move on. They say time heals all wounds, and I'm starting to look forward a bit more each day. Recently, I've been able to eat meals I couldn't before and sleep without an issue. The only thing I'm losing is my husband. I have nothing else to lose or worry about. Having gone through this, I'm sure something good is waiting for me next. This thought gave me some energy. And then a few days later, Emma contacted me again.
Hey, are you still clinging to the past? I want you to hurry up and get the divorce. Completely unapologetic. What's wrong with you? I'm preparing for the divorce, so tell that to my husband. That's a lie, right? You think David is coming back, don't you? I know what you're clinging to. It's David's income, isn't it? Income? Yeah, he's the CEO with an annual revenue of $500 billion. You were hiding that from me because you knew this would happen if I got involved, didn't you? My husband is the CEO with an annual revenue of $500 billion? Don't pretend you didn't know. That's why you could afford such a mansion. Did he tell you that? Yes, he told me everything. So hurry up and leave that house. It's going to be mine now. Too bad David won't be coming back. I'll give you as much compensation as you want, you poor thing. After saying that unilaterally, Emma hung up the phone. Now I understood why Emma targeted my husband. This call from Emma completely cooled off my feelings for my husband, and I started to think about life after divorce. From the next day on, I felt much clearer in my mind. In a way, I might have Emma to thank for that. The couple photos she sent today only disgust me now. Everything she sent was shared with my lawyer. After recovering from my illness and solving work problems, my usual routine finally returned. All that was left was to settle things with my husband and Emma. My lawyer had sent them the documents on my behalf. Now, we just had to wait for their response. A few days later, a reaction came swiftly. Hey! What were you thinking sending documents to my company? Emma was furious, her anger echoing. So, you were harassing me without being prepared for the consequences? Just sharing a bit of mine and David's happiness with you. It wasn't harassment. No, it definitely counts as harassment. Please, talk to my lawyer from now on. Goodbye. Hey! I hung up the phone right there. I felt a sense of relief knowing she was sufficiently rattled. Emma's calls continued, but I never picked up again. Similarly, my husband tried calling, and when he realized I wasn't answering, he resorted to messaging, complaining about documents sent to his parents' house, which exposed the affair and led to their condemnation. His messages were selfish and told me to tell his parents that it was all a lie. My disdain for my husband only grew. Returning home, having dinner, bathing, and going to the bedroom, I noticed something was off. Opening the closet, I saw that some of my bags and accessories were missing. Specifically the branded ones. I could think of only one suspect. You've got to be kidding, she went as far as to steal? I immediately informed my lawyer, who said we would need evidence to pursue this. Evidence. That's when I remembered installing security cameras around the house as a security measure when we built it. I had forgotten about them since I never had to use them before. Checking one of the cameras, I found it had recorded everything clearly. I reviewed footage from all the cameras in the house and, to my astonishment, I saw Emma stealing my branded items over several days while I was away. I was horrified. To think I was friends with such a person filled me with fear. The next day, I took the video data to my lawyer, who was also appalled. This person is incredible in a way, boldly stealing from someone else's home. This will certainly serve as evidence. But this will be a separate case from the divorce, is that okay? It's a criminal matter. Yes, please proceed with everything you have. I said, smiling eerily calm. After all that had happened, why should I hold back? It was time for her to take responsibility for her actions. Understood. But I do recommend changing your locks. Taking my lawyer's advice to heart, I changed the locks that very day. After that, I received a barrage of calls from both my husband and Emma, which I completely ignored. They even came to my house directly, but I didn't hesitate to call the police. Eventually, the calls from my husband and Emma stopped. A few days later, my lawyer mentioned that they wanted to negotiate a settlement. Asked what I wanted to do, I agreed to a discussion, provided my lawyer was present. I was busy and wanted to settle this quickly. The lawyer arranged the date. And on the day, we met in a conference room at the lawyer's office. Emma and my husband burst into the room, opening the door aggressively. Finally, we meet, you coward. Stop it, Emma. It's because she's been running away. Because of you, our wedding's been postponed. Emma was ready to throw something at me, anger radiating from her as she yelled. My husband desperately tried to calm her down. Seeing them after so long, I felt pathetic for having to deal with such people. Please calm down. If any violence or abusive language is detected, we will immediately call the police, understood?
The lawyer managed to settle them down for a moment, and Emma and my husband finally took their seats. With everyone ready, the discussion began.
David, you wish for a divorce, correct? We agree to the divorce. However, considering your relationship began as an affair, we will be seeking compensation. Do you have any objections?
If it means getting a divorce, fine by me.
But after paying the compensation, I want nothing to do with you ever again. Mary, is that acceptable to you?
Of course. I have no interest in continuing any relationship with him either, I stated calmly, noticing my husband's slight disturbance. But I didn't care about that anymore.
Next, regarding the amount of compensation.
When the lawyer started to talk about the compensation amount, Emma joined the conversation.
I said any amount is fine. We have a ton of money anyway.
Emma crossed her arms and spoke arrogantly. Hearing this, the lawyer adjusted his glasses.
A ton of money, you say?
Yes.
Aren't you a lawyer?
Didn't you check?
David is the CEO of a company with annual sales of $500 billion. Compensation for an affair is not a problem at all. I'll even give you a fair share of the property. Your salary must barely cover your living expenses.
Emma said this confidently, laughing, and the lawyer, unable to hold back, burst into laughter. Emma looked displeased at the sight.
What's so funny? Are you mocking me?
Emma said, shaken, to the lawyer who was drying his tears with a handkerchief, trying to compose himself.
My apologies. I see it now. It all makes sense.
The lawyer put down his handkerchief, looked at Emma, and smiled. The CEO is Mary, you know? David is just an ordinary employee there.
What?
Emma looked puzzled for a moment, but soon crossed her arms and sneered.
So the lawyer hired by a fool is also a fool.
Get real.
Did Mary lie to you saying she was the CEO?
How sad. I should be the one saying that you. Did you verify your side of the story? The lawyer turned to David, who looked pale. Seeing this, Emma, perhaps feeling anxious, started to press David.
You said you were the CEO of a company with annual sales of $500 billion, right? You weren't lying, were you?
David said nothing. Just looked down, pale. Seeing this, Emma gradually turned pale as well.
Answer me. You weren't lying, right? You said you were the CEO of a company with annual sales of $500 billion?
Emma shook her David's shoulder, but he just muttered. Sorry. This apology plunged Emma into despair. Emma, trembling, turned to face me and stood up, slamming the desk.
That's a lie, right? There's no way you're the CEO. I was the closest to you, so there's no way I wouldn't know.
Emma, still standing, turned her gaze from David to me and now started accusing me. So I decided to tell her the truth.
Just because we're best friends doesn't mean we share everything. Especially not our incomes. And it's precisely because I was close that I knew how greedy you were with money. That's why I never intended to tell you.
I looked straight at Emma, without averting my eyes, and told her this. Emma, unable to hide her shock, sat down on the spot.
Then, that house is… Of course, it's in my name. So the one leaving is my husband, no, David. He's not going to be my husband anymore.
Emma fell silent at those words.
Now that everything is clear, we will claim a reasonable amount of compensation.
My lawyer said, but neither David nor Emma seemed to hear, both remaining silent.
Next, regarding the theft.
The lawyer continued unemotionally, despite the couple's demeanor. It was quite satisfying to listen to. At the mention of theft, the couple finally looked up.
Theft? Yes. You stole several brand items from Mary when she wasn't home, didn't you?
Confronted about the theft, Emma bit her lower lip. David, apparently unaware of the incident, looked surprised.
Hey! What's this theft about? It wasn't me. I don't know anything.
Emma desperately pretended not to know, but then the lawyer presented photos from the surveillance footage.
What's this?
A footage from the surveillance camera.
A surveillance camera?
Emma seemed to be unaware of the surveillance cameras. Had she known, she wouldn't have dared to steal so boldly. The husband covered his face with his hands and sighed.
Our house is equipped with surveillance cameras. We installed them for security, since we bought quite a nice house. Why didn't you say that sooner?
Who would think you'd break in to steal?
Plus, it means you stole the keys from me. I thought I had lost them. I wanted those brand items. You wouldn't buy them for me.
So the two started arguing. Both the lawyer and I sighed in disbelief.
Please save your quarrels for later. As for the theft, we plan to file a police report. That concludes our discussion.
Hearing the word police, Emma visibly panicked.
Police is such an exaggeration. I just borrowed something from a friend. You can't possibly file a police report, right?
I didn't lend it, and I no longer consider you a friend. I will file a report. After all, it was stolen.
No. I'll compensate. Just don't call the police.
Are you going to compensate? The brand items you stole are worth a considerable amount, you know. Are you sure you can cover that? Plus, there's also the compensation. When I said this, Emma, thinking she had found a way out, turned to David.
Hey, even if you're not the CEO, you're still working, so you can pay, right? We're going to be fine, right?
David just looked down and remained silent at Emma's words. He doesn't have the ability to pay. After all, he's been absent without contacting the company, so he's going to be fired.
What?
I told you he worked at my company. Ever since he started having an affair with you, his unexcused absences increased. I've been notified. There's no way we could keep such an employee, right?
But there's still the division of assets. With that
division of assets won't be possible.
Why not? The savings accumulated as a married couple should be part of the division of assets. Aren't you a lawyer? Don't you know that?
Have you not heard anything from David? You said he told you everything, yet you missed the important parts. Then, the lawyer presented a document. As per the prenuptial agreement, if the marriage doesn't last 3 years, neither party can claim the other's assets. Since they're currently in the 2nd year of marriage, this applies. Emma trembled as she took the document.
Like this piece of paper has any power.
That is a notarized document, so it has legal force. However, it only means no division of assets. David's assets remain. Emma managed a bitter smile at this.
Well, if that's the case, we're fine. David, you have savings, right? So, we're okay, right?
The face of Emma clinging to hope was no longer that of the friend I knew. There's none. Because you kept on spending. The savings are gone. At David's words, Emma sat down on the floor. I couldn't feel sorry for her at all. This was her own doing. The discussion is over, so please submit the divorce papers promptly, and David, please pack your things and leave the house. That's all. It was unclear whether the lawyer's words were heard, but the lawyer and I left the room, leaving the sitting couple behind. I left the rest to the lawyer and went home. The divorce was finalized smoothly. With the lawyer present, David packed his belongings and left the house. I received a few messages from David, but I blocked him completely. I cut off all contact with David and Emma. After being fired from the company and losing his savings, David ended up moving into Emma's place, but with the theft incident, Emma also got fired. They both desperately looked for work but only managed to find day-pay part-time jobs. Despite receiving their salary on the same day, Emma, who is bad at saving, continued to spend and ended up being evicted for failing to pay rent. This incident became known to their relatives, and both were disowned by their parents, unable to return to their parents' house. They now live in a very old, inconvenient apartment while working part-time jobs to pay compensation. I heard from a classmate living nearby that they are occasionally seen at a local spa, looking completely different from before, with worn-out clothes and hair. As for me, work is going well, and I've joined a tennis club as a new hobby. I'm enjoying working on myself while getting some exercise. 6 months later after this incident, I went on a solo trip abroad, where I met a wonderful man, and we are currently dating. This past event has become an unforgettable part of my history, but thinking that it led to the person I am today, I might feel that I made the right choice and I am now very happy with my life.
Here, this is for you, Mom.
Emma said so, but then in the next moment, she flipped the stew onto the floor.
What?
It was the first time my son, Michael's family had come over to our house. I was preparing dinner with Stella, my daughter-in-law, and Emma, my 3-year-old granddaughter. But then Emma, instead of placing the stew at Stella's seat, deliberately spilled it on the floor. It wasn't because she tripped or slipped. She clearly did it on purpose.
Wasting food like that. Why would you do something like this?
I couldn't help but scold Emma harshly.
Because I thought it was easier for Mom to eat.
Startled by being scolded, Emma said, crying and shaken.
Easier to eat?
I couldn't believe Emma's words and unconsciously repeated them.
Mom always eats on the floor. What do you mean?
Sobbing, Emma tried to explain. Hearing Emma's surreal words, I looked at Stella to question her. Seeing Stella with a pale face and her shoulders shrunken, I felt she was hiding something.
Good morning.
Today, as always, while looking at the portrait of my deceased husband, I greeted. I have been living alone since my husband Ian passed away a few years ago. The expression on Ian's face in the portrait is grumpy, with a deep furrow between his brows. Thinking back, I hardly ever saw him smile during his lifetime. Our marriage was arranged, and from the beginning, we were careful with each other. We barely spoke, each of us strictly keeping to our roles. A happy marriage seemed far from achievable, and we never went out together even on holidays. At that time, I didn't have friends to call my own, and of course, it was a time when there were no mobile phones, so I came to think that's just what marriage was. Ian would lock himself in his room or go out alone on weekends, coming back late at night. And sometimes we wouldn't even talk at home, always an icy atmosphere prevailing. Yet, my in-laws were persistent in wanting to see a grandchild. Suspecting illness due to the lack of childbirth news, they urged me to go to the hospital repeatedly. Ian, for his part, seemed annoyed being nagged, shared the bedroom with me just for one night. Luckily, I became pregnant and decided to pour all my love into raising the child. Ian showed no interest even as my belly grew, mercilessly assigning me household chores even when I was immobilized by morning sickness and wasn't even there for the birth of our child. When I was too exhausted and asked Ian for help, he dismissed me by saying he was busy. However, when our son Michael was born, Ian changed as if he were a different person and actively involved himself in parenting. For the first time, Ian suggested we go shopping together with Michael.
What kind of picture books should we read to Michael?
I couldn't hide my joy and spoke to Ian more than usual.
Wouldn't this outfit look nice on him?
Contrary to my excitement, Ian still had an angry look. He hardly responded and dismissed all my choices with a sigh and told me that he would decide everything. I wanted us to cooperate in parenting, but Ian rejected everything I tried to do or say.
Only a man can understand what a boy needs.
And eventually, even when feeding Michael, he said he wanted to focus on the meal, so he moved to a separate room. Ian was quite strict about everything from how to hold a fork and a knife and to the order of eating. It took 6 months before Ian approved of Michael's eating manners and allowed him to eat with me. The first time I saw Michael eat, I was astonished by how neatly he did it. He never complained or showed weakness, focusing solely on his studies and not playing with friends.
Michael, well done. Why don't you take a break sometimes?
I tried to comfort Michael with some cake as a snack while Ian was away.
Sweets aren't good for the body.
He refused without even glancing my way. As Michael entered high school, he joined the baseball team, wanting to train his spirit, and became a star pitcher of the team. Even after that, thanks to his disciplined effort, he tackled everything with all his might and graduated top of his class from a prestigious university known for its difficulty. Raised by the strict Ian, Michael grew up to be so graceful in his movements that people passing by on the streets would stop and stare. It seems he was even approached by several women for dates. I once saw Michael sighing to himself. "Michael, isn't there someone you're interested in?"
I find it more meaningful to spend my time honing myself, rather than romance.
His response to my casual question was marked by an even deeper sigh. Eventually, Michael made neither friends nor lovers, always a lone wolf, establishing himself as an object of admiration from afar. After university, he landed a job at a major publishing company, enviable to many. The publishing company kept him busy, and Michael lived a life of constant business trips, hardly ever returning home. He woke up early every morning and returned home on the last train. With such a lifestyle, he had no chance for encounters, dedicating his days to work alone. Even the formidable Ian would be asleep by the time Michael came home, so I secretly prepared snacks for him.
A man's body is his capital.
Ian had always fed Michael a perfect meal of one soup and one dish, and so he was forbidden snacks, especially midnight snacks. However, no matter how balanced the diet, it was clear that the hard-working Michael was gradually losing weight due to insufficient nutrition.
He's going to collapse if he keeps this up.
Michael initially refused the midnight snack, wanting to go to bed early. But one day, after exchanging such words several times, Michael's stomach growled loudly, cutting off his words.
"The stew is ready." I said, "I want to go to sleep." "See, the stomach doesn't lie,"
I gently told Michael, who turned bright red and looked down.
"Is it really okay for me to eat?" "Of course. I made it for that reason. Thank you."
With a slightly trembling voice, Michael carefully brought the spoon to his mouth. Then, with his spoon in his mouth, Michael froze.
"Michael, what's wrong?" "It's delicious."
It seemed the taste was shockingly good for Michael. He devoured the steaming stew, even asking for seconds. After finishing 3 plates, Michael showed a smile I had never seen before.
"Ah, this is the best feeling. I didn't know there was something this delicious. You've worked hard every day. I'll prepare a snack for you tomorrow night, too."
From that day on, Michael began to eat the midnight snacks I prepared with curiosity. Thanks to that, Michael's weight returned to normal, unbeknownst to Ian. The time for midnight snacks, the only time Michael and I spent together, became the time I also looked forward to as well.
"Mom, what's for tonight's snack?" "Tonight, it's ramen." "Ramen? I've been wanting to try that."
For Michael, who had never eaten out, the midnight snacks I made were all first-time experiences. Every time, Michael would light up like a child and eagerly eat up the meal. And so, seeing Michael off to work in the morning as usual became part of my daily routine. Michael, having regained his health, made significant progress at work, becoming regarded as the star in the company. This led to a series of invitations from women, it seems. Seeing this, Ian, perhaps unable to stand it, recommended an arranged marriage, and quickly, the discussions concluded, and Michael ended up getting married without any prior dating experience. Michael married Stella, a woman who worked as a secretary to the president of a famous company. Though she was of a quiet demeanor, she appeared to be a polite, serious person.
"I am inexperienced, so I ask for your kindness."
At our first meeting during the introduction, Stella greeted us politely, a rarity these days.
"I will do my best to be a good wife and support Michael."
Stella smiled softly, narrowing her beautiful eyes, and I thought she looked as beautiful as a blossoming flower.
"We're going to be family, so don't hesitate to rely on us for anything."
Happy as if I had gained a daughter, I exchanged contact information with Stella and told her so. Stella, coming from a family that lived a bit far away, nodded happily to my words.
"Thank you very much.
It's very reassuring." Then, the newlyweds moved to the neighboring town. Anticipating they might have a lot of unfamiliar things to deal with in their new life, I decided to frequently send messages via mobile phone. However, when I asked if they needed any help, Stella, who was already domestic and skilled in household chores, seemed to have quickly won over Michael's heart. It appeared Michael often had to go on business trips due to work, but they seemed to get along well, going shopping together on holidays. Not only that, but Stella also took care of me by giving me candies when I had a sore throat or recommending a good plaster when I mentioned I had hurt my back, always considerate towards me. She would quickly reply to my messages, so I thought there was no need to worry. When I told Ian about Michael and Stella, he nodded as if to say, of course, making me completely at ease.
I'm happy to see them so happy.
Michael and Stella were blessed with a daughter named Emma in their 4th year of marriage, bringing me great joy. And I think even Ian softened a bit. However, life doesn't always continue happily. Before Emma turned 2, my Ian suddenly collapsed. Ian, who had lived a life rarely seen smiling, seemed to have been unknowingly harboring stress. By the time he was advised to be hospitalized, it was too late, and cancer had spread throughout his body. And so, Ian passed away, leaving us behind. After the funeral, as I started living alone, messages from Stella, which used to come frequently, gradually became scarce. Even when I offered to help with childcare, I was gently refused, not wanting me to go through the trouble. It started after Ian's funeral. Stella suddenly began acting strangely, and when I inquired about Emma or their life, her responses were curt, and sometimes there was no reply at all. She wouldn't answer phone calls, and I worried every day. Feeling the distance between Stella, Emma, and myself, time passed, and before I knew it, Emma was 3. Thinking at least for Emma's 3rd birthday, I decided to send a message about having a meal at my house.
Happy 3rd birthday to Emma. Have you gotten used to parenting?
Yes, thank you. It's been a while since we've seen each other. How about a meal at my place? No, thank you. Stella's cold reply made me sigh.
I haven't had much to look forward to since I became alone. I want to celebrate my first grandchild's 3rd birthday.
After sending such a message, perhaps my feelings got through, as she curtly replied, "All right, we'll go." I had doubts about Stella's sudden consent, but the joy of meeting Emma soon dispelled them. And finally, the day of the family meal arrived. "Stella, it's been a while." I greeted Stella and her somewhat tense family with a smile. "Sierra, it's been a while. Thank you for inviting us today." Wondering if they were nervous after such a long time, I let them into my house.
Come on, Emma, say hello to Grandma.
Emma, who had been shyly hiding behind Stella, came forward quietly when encouraged and bowed politely. "Grandma, hello." Contrary to Stella's uneasy and somber demeanor, Emma greeted me with a bright smile. "Emma, hello. I made stew today, let's eat together."
Yay! I love stew.
It was the first time I had seen Emma since she was just a baby. I was worried she might be shy, but Emma's cheerful and innocent demeanor lifted some of my anxiety. However, Stella, hunched over and unusually vigilant, was not the Stella I knew. She used to be considerate and attentive to her surroundings. While I was concerned about Stella, I decided to wait and see, understanding she might have things she didn't want to talk about.
Where's Michael?
Stella, looking unsettled, scanned the inside of the house.
Oh, Michael will be coming directly from his business trip, so he'll be late. I received a message. Stella, you didn't know? That's right. I'm sorry, I might have missed the message.
Stella seemed relieved for a moment and hastily checked her mobile phone as if to hide her expression. I'm sorry, I had a message too. I can't believe I missed it. I feel like a failure as a wife. Stella's blue face and the way she berated herself seemed excessive to me. The message had just come in, so there was no need to worry so much. However, I didn't press further in front of Emma.
It's not your fault, it's okay. Sit down, and I'll reheat the stew.
Sorry. Her voice was so low I had to ask again.
Stella, did you say something?
Nothing, it's nothing. Stella seemed even more withdrawn, making me feel she was hiding something from me. It was just a hunch, but these intuitions often prove correct.
I'll help you carry it.
Emma ran over with an innocent smile, cutting through the tense atmosphere.
Oh, thank you. But stay back from the stove, it's dangerous.
Emma's offer to help was impressively mature for a 3-year-old. Stella, meanwhile, sat down hesitantly and stared solemnly at her spoon.
Here you go, be careful, it's hot. Okay.
Emma energetically took her plate and slowly walked over to Stella. And then,
Here, this is for you, Mom.
Emma said, and in the next moment, did something unbelievable.
What?
Emma deliberately spilled the stew on the floor instead of placing it at Stella's seat. It wasn't because she tripped or slipped. She clearly did it on purpose.
Why would you do something like this? Wasting food.
I couldn't help but scold Emma harshly.
Because it's easier for Mom to eat.
Surprised by the scolding, Emma said, crying and shaken.
Easier to eat?
I couldn't believe Emma's words and repeated them unconsciously.
Mom always eats on the floor. Eating on the floor? What do you mean? Mom always eats on the floor because Dad makes her.
Emma tried to explain, sobbing. Hearing Emma's surreal words, I looked at Stella, who was trembling and pale.
Stella, what's going on?
Ah. Just as Stella was about to speak, the doorbell rang, and Michael appeared at the entrance. Despite the awkward timing, I quickly cleaned up the spilled stew and welcomed Michael in.
I'm home. Did something happen?
Michael seemed puzzled by the delay between the doorbell and the door opening.
Welcome back. I couldn't leave the stove.
I tried to act normally, hiding my agitation.
I see, is that stew I smell?
Yes, your favorite stew. I felt relieved I had made stew and breathed a sigh of relief. Unaware of anything, Michael cheerfully entered the living room, ignoring Stella's distress and sat down with a thud.
Nothing beats Mom's stew.
Michael spoke loudly while Stella bit her lip tightly. Feeling the tense atmosphere between them, I forced a smile, struggling to maintain a facade. I was skeptical about Michael making her eat on the floor, but I sensed their relationship wasn't good. The conversation remained superficial, the stew tasted bland, but somehow, the meal ended peacefully. After the Michael family left, I messaged Stella about the incident. The only reply I got was it's nothing. It can't be nothing. I murmured quietly to the mobile phone screen, reflecting on our interactions. Stella's messages have been cold lately. The distant replies didn't seem like they were coming from the caring Stella I knew. Thinking about the incident made me wonder if Michael was controlling her phone.
I can't overlook what just happened. I need to check on things myself.
With that thought, I decided to visit Michael's house. Even though it's spring, it was already dusk. I shivered in the cold air as I approached their house. Just then, I heard a loud argument.
It's your fault. What?
That was Michael's voice. Panicked, I pressed the doorbell. Michael, with a forced smile, greeted me.
Mom, we just said goodbye, what brings you back?
I need to talk to Stella.
What? Well, Stella's tired from the visit, I'll pass the message.
Michael blocked my way, visibly flustered.
This is an important matter between women.
My firm tone left Michael with no choice but to let me in.
Stella?
Looking around inside, I noticed the bathroom light was on.
I'm going in.
As I headed to the bathroom, Michael hurried after me, panicking.
Stella's in there, you can't go in now.
But I entered the bathroom before Michael could stop me. And what I saw was unexpected.
Stella!
Stella was in the shower, drenched, sitting on the floor. Sierra.
I was cleaning the shower and accidentally turned it on myself.
Stella weakly smiled as she spoke to me.
This is terrible, you'll catch a cold.
After finding a towel, I wrapped Stella in it, drying her hair and arms.
I can't believe this. Sorry, Mom, Stella always messes up when I'm not watching.
Michael didn't even attempt to get a towel, instead crossing his arms with an angry look. Stella was in a daze, quietly letting me help her. Seeing Stella's slight shivers, I couldn't deny Emma's words were true.
Stella, I've dried you off somewhat, but you need to change immediately.
Sierra, I'm sorry. Thank you. Always like this. Stella can't do anything without me. Michael complained, but Stella's fear was evident. Pretending to use the bathroom, I discreetly called the police, and soon the doorbell rang, signaling their arrival.
Who's that?
Michael answered reluctantly.
We received complaints about loud noises from this house.
The officer said, to which Michael lied about a misunderstanding. The officer insisted on speaking with us after checking the neighborhood.
Today's a bad day.
Scratching his head, Michael opened the door. 3 officers entered swiftly, one securing Stella and Emma while the others restrained Michael.
What?
Michael resisted desperately, but the officers were unfazed.
What the hell? What did I do?
He knew he couldn't fight off the police, but he still tried to make himself loose. To that the police said in a low voice,
If you don't calm down, you're obstructing the execution of our duties.
Michael turned pale and suddenly became quiet. Meanwhile, Stella, overwhelmed by the sudden events, saw the subdued Michael and burst into tears. Looking at me and the officers, she spoke quietly. I can't take it anymore. Stella revealed her pent-up frustrations.
As soon as we got married, he submitted my resignation without my consent. I protested to the CEO, but no one believed me.
Rumors had spread that Stella complained about her low salary and was unhappy with the CEO, none of which were true. Ultimately, her resignation was accepted despite her objections.
Life became hell after I became a housewife.
First, her mobile phone was taken away. In her unfamiliar married life, it seems Stella had many things she wanted to discuss with me or her parents, but Michael wouldn't listen.
Especially about meals. Whatever I cooked was always criticized as bad. I wanted to ask Sierra for recipes, but was told to figure it out on my own.
At first, it was just verbal criticisms, so Stella thought she could bear it.
Things got worse when Emma was born. He did help with childcare, but...
Michael appeared to be a kind and good father to Emma, but his verbal abuse towards Stella in her presence increased.
After Ian passed, the harassment intensified.
Verbal abuse became a routine. Stella was ordered to eat meals on the floor and endured days of being overworked by Michael. When they went shopping, she was only allowed to buy what Michael specified, limiting her outings to the bare essentials. Any slight dissatisfaction from Michael, like a lightly cleaned area or a wrinkled shirt, resulted in Stella being doused with cold shower. Using water as a means of harassment left no physical marks.
I had no one to turn to. It was so hard.
Tears fell again from Stella's eyes. She confirmed my suspicions of her suffering under Michael's harassment.
You've been enduring all alone. It must have been so hard.
I regretted not noticing the signs earlier. As I comforted Stella, I reflected on my actions. Michael faced interrogation after everything was revealed. During the interrogation, Michael sat arrogantly, denying any wrongdoing. An officer, unable to overlook Michael's behavior, pressed him hard. Why Stella acted fearfully around Michael, and the reason Emma naturally spilled the stew on the floor were questioned. Even without visible marks, harassment traces could be investigated with modern medical technology, the officer sternly stated. Finally cornered, Michael confessed.
I've been under a lot of stress.
Michael murmured as if speaking to himself. He resented the strict discipline enforced by his father since childhood. He was strictly told about the order of the meal he ate and the right size he was supposed to eat in one bite.
You can't even do this.
Harsh scoldings for minor mistakes were part of his upbringing. Forced to learn kanji and English at a young age, Michael was made to revise tirelessly for any mistakes. In elementary school, while peers enjoyed games, Michael was sent to unwanted lessons and cram schools. He revealed his dissatisfaction with all of it. In high school, he was forced into a strict baseball team, despite having no interest.
The first time I played soccer during a break, I found it incredibly fun, but my father never allowed me to switch to the soccer team.
I was shocked by Michael's words. I trusted Ian to take care of meals in another room, never questioning it, and rejoiced at Michael's academic and extracurricular diligence.
All the times you were working so hard, it wasn't because you enjoyed those activities.
I didn't know Michael loved soccer, and I was unaware of his interactions with Ian. I was just preparing lunches every day without knowing anything about my family.
I had no idea you felt that way, Michael. It's natural for you not to know. He said it was a man's promise and made me keep quiet.
Michael, adeptly trained mentally, easily maintained composure without my knowledge. He didn't enjoy studying either. He was restricted from popular student activities like gaming and fashion interests. And even his love for sweets was limited. Ultimately, an arranged marriage decided by Ian added to his growing resentment. Having the marriage arranged without his consent, Michael seemed to have started feeling indifferent about everything. Even after getting married and moving away, the pressure of being married to someone chosen by Dad made him feel monitored, and the curse lifted only after Dad's death.
I became obsessed with the idea that Stella should strive just like me.
That was how Michael concluded. I thought I had raised Michael together with Ian. I had no inkling Michael was enduring such hardship behind my back. The guilt and powerlessness overwhelmed me. Despite Michael and Ian keeping silent, I bear responsibility for not noticing.
Stella, this isn't something an apology can fix, but it was my fault for raising him poorly. I'm truly sorry.
No.
I'm the one who should apologize for not being able to heal Michael's heart.
Stella's words, ever so kind, made tears spill from my eyes.
Stella, you've done nothing wrong. I'm truly sorry for everything.
Afterward, Michael was arrested for assault. Having shared his burdens, he seemed somewhat relieved. He will now have time to reflect and make amends. Stella decided to divorce Michael, taking Emma back to her parents' home.
Sierra, thank you for everything. I haven't done anything worthy of your thanks.
I decided to support Stella and Emma financially in Michael's stead. Initially hesitant, Stella accepted after I expressed a desire to maintain a good relationship.
I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. I'll always consider you as my family. Thank you. Having a relationship with you and Emma is a great comfort to me.
Stella, having settled into her new life, seemed to regain her bright smile. I regularly received photos of Stella and Emma. She also invites me several times a year to visit Emma.
Sierra, would you like to come over sometime?
Emma misses you. Seasons have cycled through peaceful days since the incident. Emma started going to elementary school and even visited my house alone.
Exactly, Emma, you're doing great.
I was teaching Emma how to make hamburgers during one of her visits.
Grandma, this is fun.
Emma showed a carefree smile, shaping the hamburgers perfectly.
Indeed, it's fun. It'd be nice if Mom could join us next time. Yeah. I'll make a lot.
I deeply cherished these moments of happiness. Relieved that Michael hadn't inflicted lasting wounds on Emma, I wished for her to always be smiling. As we placed her small hamburgers in the pan, her eyes sparkled with anticipation for the completion of the meal.
May your life be filled with smiles from now on.
I whispered, as if making a vow.
You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife.
Christopher yelled and threw me into the shed. I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain. Meanwhile, Christopher shut the door. The shed was engulfed in darkness in an instant. I leaped towards the door and pounded on it fiercely. But it didn't open. It seemed like Christopher did something from the outside. The door felt heavy, and I was overwhelmed by a sense of despair. Was this all my fault? No, I had been aware of Christopher's flamboyant affairs even when we were dating, but I turned a blind eye. Because I loved him. But everyone has their breaking point. Today was mine. When I confronted Christopher about his cheating, he flipped out, leading to this mess. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I will get out of here and make Christopher realize his mistake. But I can't think of a plan. As I'm overwhelmed by my raging emotions, I hear the door open. My name is Mariah. I'm a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Christopher, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have kids because Christopher didn't want any. I had always dreamt of becoming a mom, but by the time I got married, I was already 35, an age when pregnancy becomes challenging. But now, I think it's probably for the best. Christopher would have too many issues as a dad, and I can't imagine dealing with a child in my current mental state. I met Christopher 12 years ago. I was 32, and he was a youthful 27 years old. We were colleagues, and he often affectionately called me Mariah. I was immediately attracted to Christopher. He was good-looking, cheerful, and friendly. But I couldn't exactly call myself beautiful, and considering our age difference, I didn't think I stood a chance. Then, out of the blue, Christopher confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was overjoyed and quickly accepted. Our relationship started smoothly. Christopher was understanding about my insecurities regarding my age and appearance.
Don't worry about that,
he said. I was happy. The reason Christopher chose me was a mystery, but as long as I believed he loved me, it felt like everything was resolved. But it was a sweet illusion. As our first anniversary approached, Christopher's true nature began to reveal itself. He always used the same excuse, I forgot my wallet, making me pay for all our date expenses. Up until then, we had been splitting the bill, so the sudden financial burden hurt. More than that, Christopher's repeated excuses for not paying made me see him as insincere. Once, I decided to beat him to it, and said, I forgot my wallet, before he said so. It was right after we met up. Christopher responded immediately. Why don't you go get it? Your place is close, right? Close? I took the train here, you know that's not happening. After a nonchalant nod, Christopher turned his back on me. Christopher? If you don't have money, we can't go on a date, right? Let's call it a day. With a wave, he disappeared into the crowd. All I could do was to stand there, dumbfounded. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with Christopher. Could I ever be happy with him? Even with those doubts, I couldn't leave him. I had a relationship with only one guy before Christopher. The first relationship was during my student days, a brief 6-month affair that ended when he found someone else. As for Christopher, he was quite popular with the women at work. He knew it too, smoothly delegating his tasks to them. He hadn't tried that with me yet, but when would his feelings change? I grew increasingly timid and even more dependent on Christopher. His smile, his sweet words. I convinced myself they were privileges only for me. But Christopher never understood my desperate clinging. One day at work, I overheard him talking to another male colleague. I'm with Mariah, but she's the best option for now. She's older, but she pays for our dates, even gifts me watches sometimes. If I were to marry, Mariah seems like a good choice. The other two spend too much, no way. Christopher was seeing 2 other women besides me. I secretly hired a detective to investigate him. I wanted to prove what I heard was a mistake. But the reality was harsh. One of Christopher's girlfriends was a colleague. Another worked for a client company. After much contemplation, I chose to overlook Christopher's promiscuity. He had chosen me as his partner for marriage. Perhaps it was because I catered to Christopher, never complaining about his whims. I believed that once we were married, his bad habits would disappear. But after the wedding, he started staying out blatantly. Upon investigation, it was always with women in their early to mid-30s. Christopher was irresistibly drawn to the financial security these women provide and the inferiority these women felt towards him, leading them to devote themselves completely. Christopher had a girlfriend named Carol. When she realized she'd been deceived, she came to apologize to me first. "I'm so sorry. Christopher told me he was single."
It's okay, we're both victims here.
I said calmly. Carol was 35. The age I was when I got married. She had been with Christopher for 2 years. For a woman, that's precious time spent on Christopher. It was even sadder knowing she had seriously considered marrying him. Carol promised to break it off with Christopher. I promised to support her if anything happened. That day, Christopher seemed restless. He had a 2-night, 3-day company trip to Los Angeles starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, Christopher tried to hurry back to his room. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up. "I talked to Carol." "Who's that?" Christopher tilted his head, feigning ignorance. I spread the documents I received from the detective on the table.
"I've known for a while that you have been seeing many women." "Mariah, what are you doing?"
Christopher lost it.
"Yeah, you're right. So what? I gave those girls a good dream. I deserve something in return."
Carol was hurt. I mustn't let myself get angry alongside him. I remained calm and said,
"She believed you would marry her. So, what? You gonna divorce me, Mariah? Then maybe I'd consider." "No, forget it. She's not thoughtful enough, and there are better women out there."
"Christopher." I was shocked. I expected him to be upset, but to casually talk about divorce and compare Carol like that.
"Anyway, Mariah, you know what happens when you cross me, right?"
I was confused. Christopher was the one in the wrong. Yet, he acted as if I had broken some rules. He forcefully grabbed my arm, making me stand up, and led me outside. There it was, the shed. He stopped in front of it, flung open the door, and threw me inside.
"You deserve this for standing up to me, you worthless wife."
I fell and hit my back against something, groaning in pain.
"Christopher, you can't be serious."
By the time I turned around, Christopher had already shut the door. I rushed to the door in shock, but it wouldn't open. Christopher must have done something from the outside.
"Reflect on this. I'm going out." "Wait, Christopher. Please wait."
Being locked up here, I couldn't care less about reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out of here, I'll wither away. And with Christopher leaving for a company trip tomorrow, what will become of me after 3 days of being left here? I had hoped he might let me out soon. But his footsteps faded away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door shut, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability crept up from my feet. Had I really done something so terrible? I knew Christopher could be cold-hearted, but I had never imagined it would go this far. Maybe he doesn't care what happens to me. Perhaps he'll actually leave me locked up here while he's on his trip. Then, it happened.
Mariah."
A soft voice called out. I was startled. The door had opened. There stood Carol, Christopher's ex-girlfriend. She had come to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and noticing noise from the yard, she came to check.
"I saw Christopher locking you in here. It's terrible."
"It's okay. I chose to be with him, knowing what kind of man he is. This is on me," I said, as if convincing myself. "But I'm grateful. I'm glad you were here."
"I dated Christopher too, indirectly taking you for granted."
"That's not true." I slowly shook my head. "You didn't know anything. You truly liked Christopher. That's all, right? Just like me."
"Mariah."
Carol looked like she was about to cry, quickly wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I told her, "Carol, I need your help. Will you stand up to Christopher with me?" Carol looked at me in surprise.
"Stand up to Christopher? What are you planning?"
"I'll explain it now. After I shared the plan, Carol was shocked but nodded in agreement. Christopher had apparently gone to a friend's house. Once we made sure he wasn't home, Carol and I went back inside the house. The plan would begin with Christopher's return. The day I was locked into the shed and the 3 days of the company trip passed. Christopher came out to the yard.
She must be okay, right?
He mumbled in front of the shed. Realizing the severity of his actions, he was probably feeling guilty. But it was too late. Hey, Mariah. The reflection time's over. You can come out now. Christopher opened the shed door. The moment he did, his expression froze. He rubbed his eyes as if not trusting what he saw and looked inside the shed again. The result didn't change. Who are you? In front of Christopher, a woman who was not me sat huddled. In his mind, I had been locked in there the whole time. It was impossible for the clothes or hairstyle to change midway. The woman looked up. Christopher's face contorted even more. Carol, what are you doing? Where's Mariah? I'm right here. I emerged from where I was hiding. At the same time, Carol stood up. Surrounded by the two of us, Christopher looked back and forth between me and Carol, flustered. What are you two up to? Relax. We're not going to lock you up. Just calm down and listen to what Carol has to say. Carol's story? Christopher frowned, and Carol seemed to recoil. But she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and blurted it out. Christopher, you've been deceiving me. I'm going to demand compensation. What? Christopher seemed about to explode with anger, but somehow held back. After watching his reaction, I spoke up. Christopher, let's get a divorce. And of course, you'll be paying compensation to me as well. You too. What's with both of you? You are giving women dreams, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to come back to reality. Yes, this was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on Christopher. But it wasn't over yet. Christopher's mobile phone rang. Hello? Dad? It's a bad time. I'll call back later. Apologize to Mariah now? Dad, you can't be serious. I've told Polly and the others everything. Christopher's face turned pale. Then, things moved quickly. Raphael, Polly, rushed over from his family home and fiercely reprimanded his son. I had copied all the documents I received from the detective and sent them to Polly. I've heard it all from Mariah. What kind of person are you? This is the end of our relationship with you. No, Dad. Christopher looked at Polly with tears in his eyes. But Polly's resolve was firm. He ordered Christopher to pay all the compensation to the two women himself. Don't be ridiculous, Dad. Please don't say that. Christopher clung to Polly. Please, I beg you. I'll change. So, can you at least pay half? Be quiet. You're embarrassing. Mariah, I'm sorry. I never thought my son could be this terrible. I'll make sure he has nothing to do with you anymore. Please don't worry about it, Polly. Christopher faced a substantial compensation claim from the lawyer hired by me and Carol and was forced to pay a significant amount. Christopher's misdeeds spread quickly among both families. They whispered about disowning him, and eventually, the gossip reached his workplace. I've been fired from my job. I see. I remained calm and collected. Christopher, with a trembling voice and downcast eyes. I can't pay the compensation. He kept repeating. How can I pay it without a job? I also have been cut off from relatives. There's nothing I can do. That's how I felt, Christopher, when you locked me up. Trapped in the dark, unable to go anywhere or do anything. That feeling of being left in the dark with no way out. Now, Christopher was tasting that same despair. There was another fact Christopher didn't know. Carol was pregnant. I was shocked, but even more, I was happy for her. Congratulations!
I know it'll be tough as a single mom, but you can do it.
Thank you.
I'll try my best to be a good mom.
We didn't want Christopher's sins to burden the child. We wished for the child to grow up strong and straightforward, like Carol. I also thought if I hadn't given up on having a child with Christopher, maybe I'd have had another family member. I asked Carol,
"Please let me meet the child when they are born,"
and saw her off. A child. I intensely wished for one too. Eventually, I decided to adopt once my life was stable. Christopher was gone, so I stayed in the house, and there were part-time jobs available at the nearby grocery store or supermarket. All right, time to gear up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose. I made friends at work, and the joy of mutual support was new to me, as Christopher had never helped me. Then, here came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive, but I didn't mind. I met her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the child. Violet recognized me as her mom. Innocently.
"Mom,"
she called me. Christopher, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Walking my path with my newfound Violet. Not seeking affirmation from Christopher's sweet nothings. To recognize and believe in myself. As a person, as a mom. "You always seem so happy these days," said David, my boss. David was 39. Coincidentally the same age as Christopher. But unlike Christopher, David was unpretentious, earnest, and a bit inept. They were entirely different. Perhaps that's why I could open up to a man of Christopher's age.
"Mariah, you adapted to work quickly, you're reliable."
It's all thanks to your guidance, David, I said with a laugh. David, for some reason, blushed and looked away.
"Mariah, do you have plans for your next day off?"
That day. I'm going to the amusement park with Violet.
Oh, right.
Wouldn't want to intrude. What about the day after?
David, what's up?
I noticed that. David's gaze towards me was gentle. It seemed unsettled at some point, as if hiding another emotion. Now I understand. It was probably similar to the feelings I once had for Christopher. David took a deep breath and blurted out,
"Mariah, would you go out with me?"
And so, David became my partner. At first, Violet was wary, but she warmed up to him after a few meetings. One day, while enjoying afternoon tea with Violet at home, the doorbell rang. Violet cheerfully replied,
"Coming,"
and ran to the door. Then returned with a pleased look.
"It's someone you know, Mom."
"Who?"
A tall man."
Her words alarmed me. There was only one person that came to mind. I told Violet firmly,
"Don't come out."
"A dangerous person?" "Okay." Violet sensed my tension and looked worriedly at me.
"It's okay. Mom won't lose."
I patted Violet's head and went to the door. As expected, it was him.
"Who's that kid?"
His first words weren't even a greeting. Apparently, it was Christopher.
"What do you want?"
I asked.
"I need money, Mariah."
You can see, right? Indeed, Christopher looked terrible. He hadn't found a steady job since moving from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, he had nowhere to stay and ended up on the streets.
"I don't have money to lend you."
"Hey, Mariah. You've gotten pretty arrogant. Think you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing." But Christopher wouldn't understand that. No pity. Just disgust. Christopher took a step closer.
"Mariah, please. This is the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that."
I sighed. His promise to disappear was welcome. But should I help this man?
"Mom?"
Then, I heard Violet's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic.
"Don't come here,"
I told Violet, but she didn't stop.
Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you need, I'll give it to you.
With that, Violet pressed $1 into Christopher's hand. Christopher stood there, stunned, then collapsed and started crying. A child's innocence. It was the happiness Christopher had once rejected. Violet will start elementary school next year, so we went to look for a school bag. David came along. As the three of us entered the store. "What a lovely family," the store manager remarked. Violet beamed proudly, and David and I blushed.
"Mom, I like this color."
"Let's see." Violet picked an orange bag. It would suit her lively personality well. "Let's consider this a gift from me."
"Oh, you shouldn't."
I attempted to counter David's impromptu gesture.
"I want to give it from me." "Then, I'll consider this as a gift from you too."
Violet chimed in cheerfully. David and I looked at each other and nodded in agreement. "Sounds good." "Yes, let's do that." So we split the cost and bought the new bag together. Being so delighted, Violet didn't let go of the bag all day, even holding it while sleeping. Meanwhile, David approached me with a certain proposal. About the venue.
"I don't need a wedding. I didn't have one with my previous husband, and I'm past the age for wedding dresses." "That's not true. I want to see you in a wedding dress, Mariah,"
David insisted. I recalled Christopher, who begrudged even a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. David was different. He proposed with a ring. Now, we're saving for the wedding.
"You want to see Mom in a dress, right?"
"Yes." David had skillfully brought Violet to his side. I could only surrender with a smile. In preparation for the wedding, I embarked on a diet. All the effort paid off when I could wear the dress of my dreams, a moment of immense joy. I couldn't thank David enough for suggesting the wedding. During the ceremony, an emotional David started crying, causing a stir among friends and colleagues. I spent most of the time calming him down, but the ceremony was memorable and fantastic. Afterward, I sold the house I lived in with Christopher. It held memories, but they were all tainted with Christopher's lies. David's apartment was small, but it felt right for our fresh start. The wedding photo took center stage in our new home. David and I smiled awkwardly at the camera. Violet started elementary school. Her bright personality helped her fit in right away. She'd come home and share stories about her friends from school.
"I came first in the race." "That's amazing. Just like David and me."
Violet blushed, and so did David. I'm profoundly grateful for meeting these two and becoming a family. My past life revolved around pleasing and depending on Christopher. It was my life, yet it felt like it was lived for Christopher. Now, I'm walking a life for myself. Not just for me, but for David and Violet too. Our future shines brightly. "You're not allowed in here." Linda blocked my way, standing right in front of me. I reconsidered, thinking maybe the funeral was not ready yet, but I was not just an attendee, I was a family member. I looked into Linda's face for an answer, but there was none written there. "You can't come in."
"No, but I'm Tom's wife."
At my attempt to reason, Linda bursted into laughter.
"There is no way a wife is a family member. You're an outsider, so you can't attend the funeral. Get it? Now please leave."
Linda pointed towards the door, urging me to exit. Swallowing what I wanted to say, I stared straight into her face.
"So should I really leave?"
My name is Kate, edging into my mid-30s at 35 years old. I work as a lawyer in a small legal office in a regional city. I married Tom, my colleague and age mate from the same office, 5 years ago. Being ambitious, Tom switched to a major law firm 3 years ago and has been busy ever since. He suggested I switch too, but I declined. I was content with my current office and job. My work, though, was a bit different from what the general public imagines for a lawyer. Primarily, I supported rehabilitation for those recently out of prison or on probation. I assisted with legal procedures and connect them with welfare and medical professionals when needed. Many imagine lawyers as flamboyantly active in courtrooms. That's exactly Tom's job, bustling between the court and office daily. Of course, I was not uninterested in such work. However, an incident led me to take an interest in rehabilitation support. Linda was displeased with this and looked down on my job as helping those who've strayed from society. I understood her to some extent. The world is always harsh on offenders. Of course, I don't believe offenders should be redeemed without atoning either. But Linda's disdain was extreme. It's not just my job she despised, but me personally. Every time we met at my in-laws' house, she never missed a chance for snide remarks.
When will Kate quit her job to have kids?
Linda's sarcastic voice reached me as I assisted Jack. For years, Jack's health had been failing, requiring in-home care, which Linda barely provided. So, I filled in, enduring Linda's barbs as I care for Jack.
But Kate's middle-aged now, maybe kids are out of the question. Why didn't Tom marry someone younger?
Ignoring Linda's complaints, I gently laid Jack on the bed. Trying not to catch Linda's attention, I sighed. Then, Jack's lips moved slightly, seemingly saying not to worry. I smiled awkwardly at Jack. No matter how busy I was or how much Linda taunted me, I didn't stop caring for Jack. Sadly, Jack's condition kept worsening. Just a week ago, he was able to enjoy fruits, but now he can't chew. Not just me, Linda too was shocked by Jack's rapid decline. To the point of avoiding his room. Doctors said he had a week left at most. Realizing his end, Jack insisted on no more hospitalizations, wanting to stay home. Jack apologized repeatedly for the trouble as I cared for him, but I've never felt burdened. Jack seemed to resent his dependence on others for survival. I tried to spend my days with Jack as cheerfully as possible, hiding the shock I harbored within. That changed with a single, desperate accusation from Linda.
You're just after Jack's inheritance, aren't you?
Linda hurled these words at me as I was about to enter Jack's room with his change of clothes. Confused, I stood frozen in the hallway.
All your caregiving won't earn you a cent.
Wait a minute.
I never said anything about wanting the inheritance.
As I protested, Linda's eyes widened even more.
You're trying to get on Jack's good side to influence his will, aren't you? I know it, even if you don't say it, Kate.
Linda glared at me angrily, but I couldn't understand. Until she mentioned it, I hadn't thought of the inheritance at all. I purely wanted to be there for Jack, making his remaining time comfortable, choosing to spend more time with him than at work. I had no ulterior motive to receive an inheritance through my caregiving. Tom, alerted by the commotion, came upstairs.
What's going on here? Why are you shouting?
Tom, Linda's saying.
Listen, Tom. This woman, she's after Jack's inheritance.
Linda's words drowned out mine. Hearing Linda's claim, Tom's expression darkened.
Kate, are you really after the inheritance?
Faced with Tom's suspicious gaze, I shook my head.
Of course not.
You know, Tom.
Linda hasn't been caring for Jack at all. That's not true. I'm not involved because you said to leave it to you.
I felt dizzy at Linda's absurd claims. She was trying to paint me as the villain, feeding all sorts of things to Tom. I prayed Tom wouldn't just take Linda's words at face value, but my hope was in vain. Tom looked at me with contempt.
So, what Mom said was true?
Tom muttered to himself, seemingly convinced. At that moment, Linda smirked at me. A look of victory visible only to me.
I can't trust someone who insults Mom to care for Dad.
Please leave this house. Tom's voice was cold as he made this declaration. Struggling to find my voice, I managed to speak.
Who will care for Jack then? It's obviously Mom.
Who else? Caught off guard by being suddenly addressed, Linda panicked. She probably hadn't expected to be tasked with caring for Jack herself. I handed her Jack's clothes, her smile strained.
I'm a bit busy today. But Kate can do it instead. Just no inheritance.
With that, Linda hurried downstairs. Tom, seeing me with the clothes, tersely told me not to do anything unnecessary and followed Linda down. I couldn't believe my actions were misconstrued this way. Feeling dejected, I entered Jack's room. Jack, thought to be asleep, was sitting up slowly in his electric bed, watching me intently. "Did you hear that?" I asked awkwardly, and Jack nodded slowly. He motioned for me to sit beside the bed. As I gently took a seat in a nearby chair, Jack began to speak in a whispery, frail voice.
"Kate, I know better than anyone that you're not the kind of person to do such things."
Jack muttered in pain, his words coming out in fits and starts.
"I'm truly grateful for everything you've done. I can't thank you enough."
Having said what he needed to, Jack slowly closed his eyes. And that was our last conversation. The funeral, per Jack's wishes, was to be held at my in-laws' house. It was planned as a small ceremony, with only family, relatives, and a few close acquaintances. On the day, it was raining from morning, and I was careful not to get my mourning clothes wet as I walked to the in-laws' house. Tom, serving as the chief mourner, had left home earlier than me. He's probably meeting up with Linda by now, going over the day's proceedings. The misunderstanding that I was after Jack's inheritance hadn't been cleared. Since that incident, Tom blatantly looked down on me. Now fully on Linda's side, I watched him without thought. With Jack gone, everything seemed inconsequential to me. Upon reaching the in-laws' house, Linda was waiting at the entrance. As I tried to pass her with a brief greeting, she grabbed my arm. "You're not allowed in here." "What?" Linda stood there, blocking my way. I thought maybe things weren't ready, but I was not just an attendee, I was a part of the family. I looked into Linda's face for an answer, but it wasn't there. "There's no way you can enter." "No, but I'm also Tom's wife." At my response, Linda burst out laughing. "There is no way a wife is a family member. You're an outsider. You can't attend the funeral. Understand? Now please leave." Linda pointed at the front door, urging me to leave. I swallowed what I wanted to say and stared straight into her face. So should I really leave? Perhaps it was my unexpectedly strong gaze that made Linda falter for a moment. She looked at me suspiciously, thinking if I had some ulterior motives. But finding nothing, Linda turned her back to me. "Just leave, please. I don't even want to see your face." Linda tried to dismiss me with a somewhat blustering tone. There was only one thing left for me to do. Leave quietly. It was regrettable that I couldn't say my final goodbye to Jack, but it was the only option. "Please tell the relatives I'm sorry I couldn't attend." With that last bit of resistance, I left the in-laws' house. As I did, a man in a black funeral attire entered. He looked surprised to see me. I laughed off his questioning gaze, which seemed to ask why I was leaving before the funeral. I couldn't have lied under his scrutinizing gaze. Suddenly, the area around the in-laws' house felt like a different world. Several black luxury cars were parked nearby. Shouts from the entrance reached my ears, making me stop in my tracks. Amidst the men's angry shouts, I heard Linda's scream and Tom's anguished voice. The curious neighbors peeked out from their doors and windows, intrigued by the commotion. Sighing, I returned to the in-laws' house. I didn't want to help Linda, but letting the situation escalate would be problematic. As I appeared among the men, a glimpse of hope flickered in Linda's eyes, who was almost crying. "Kate! Help! These people say they're the mafia!" I felt like holding my head in despair at this expected turn of events. But I was the only one who could resolve the situation. I spotted a familiar face among the men and called out to him. "You all seem as lively as ever." The man noticed my return and smiled. "Well, if Kate's in trouble, we can't just stand by." Linda let out a short scream when she saw me. "You're with the mafia too!" Linda trembled at her own misunderstanding. "That's absurd." But I quickly dismissed it. The men surrounding Linda and Tom stepped aside, allowing a path. Walking through was a man in a tailor-made black funeral suit, his gaze intense. It was Ben, the man I had passed when leaving the in-laws' house earlier.
Quite bold to turn away a benefactor of our organization, aren't you?
Linda, intimidated by Ben, collapsed to the ground.
We have nothing to do with the mafia.
Linda bravely retorted, but she recoiled, still sitting on the floor as the men closed in. Tom stood frozen in the corner, wanting nothing to do with the situation.
Does this woman know anything?
Ben asked me in surprise. I shook my head. I turned to Linda, still sitting on the floor, and addressed her.
Do you remember what happened 7 years ago when Jack was arrested?
Linda's face contorted, possibly recalling the incident. 7 years ago, Jack was arrested as a suspect in a case. I, still a novice lawyer then, was in charge of his defense. To put it simply, Jack was innocent. He had not committed the crime. But Jack stubbornly insisted he was guilty, as if protecting someone.
The person Jack was protecting was a member of our organization,
Ben added solemnly. Eventually, persuaded by senior members, a younger member came forward and Jack was released. But the price of the stand-in was heavy, and Jack's reintegration into society was difficult. That's when I developed an interest in rehabilitation support. While legally supporting Jack's reintegration, I also served as a liaison with the mafia trying to contact him. Arrests and releases were common in the mafia. Every time, I was called upon to spend days with them. Kate not only looked after Jack but also our younger members. Nobody usually wants to take care of people fresh out of prison. It seemed the mafia's reputation for loyalty wasn't just a fiction. They felt indebted to Jack for trying to take the fall for one of their young members and vowed to always help when in trouble. And somehow, that promise had extended to me. Kate's like our consulting lawyer. Ben turned to me with a smile that didn't quite match his sharp gaze. Still intimidated by Ben's changing expressions, I nodded awkwardly. Ben, who had smiled at me, now glared at Linda as if he had long forgotten the earlier moment.
Where did you put Jack's money?
A very cold voice echoed in the entrance hall. Linda finally started to tremble. Looking for an excuse, her gaze wandered meaninglessly.
Tell the truth,
Ben said casually, and Linda broke down. Tears flowed as she shook her head in anger.
I spent it all. It's all dirty money anyway. Whatever my husband earns is mine to spend. What's wrong with using it?
Tom somehow managed to keep the agitated Linda from storming out of the house. Ben, who was accustomed to overwhelmingly tense situations, watched this without changing his expression.
Jack's money wasn't dirty. It was hard-earned cash from a burger joint, saved by our young guys. Did you spend everything Jack was saving to leave for Kate?
Ben's outcry echoed around.
I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Let me apologize on her behalf, please, no violence.
Tom was the first to reach his limit. He apologized deeply without a hint of shame. I was astounded watching Tom, who had been silent till now, turn apologetic when he sensed personal danger. He even said sorry to me for doubting me, but I was not in the mood to listen.
Can you pay back everything Jack saved for Kate?
Ben deliberately intimidated Tom and Linda with his glare. They nodded like puppets, their faces pale. Linda had embezzled over $100,000 of Jack's savings. It was shocking to learn that not only Linda but also Tom had been spending Jack's savings on drinks for colleagues and lottery tickets. Tom, suspected of private dealings with the mafia, was forced to resign from the law firm. I planned to divorce Tom once everything was settled. With Jack gone, I saw no need to force myself to maintain ties with Tom or Linda. Linda, under pressure from the mafia, sold her house and moved into an old, cheap apartment, working from morning till night. All to repay every penny of Jack's savings she had used. I never intended to take the money, but Ben insisted that Linda should fully understand the consequences of using someone else's money, so I agreed to go along with it. I continued to devote myself to my work, but recently a colleague invited me to start a new office together. They had always watched my work and thought I deserved a more liberating environment. I accepted the invitation and now spend busy yet fulfilling days establishing the new office.